welcome back to the Arcane Archive. Sorry, I was just kind of pontificating. No, sorry, not pontificating. Ruminating and pondering. That's the word. We'll pontificate much later. But I was ruminating and pondering on a number of the stories that we have for you here on today's episode of Cautionary Chronicles. I feel like we got a bit of a roller coaster set for today, Sammy, don't you think? I feel like we got a number of like lighthearted, more funny, comical ones, and then we've got like a lot of just kind of sad, like emotionally kind of like moving ones where they just get you in your feels, and you kind of just you feel bad for everyone kind of involved, you know, and not in a rage way, but more so just it's a sad kind of thing, you know, like it's unfortunate and sad, and yet oh so necessary, I think. But you know what, maybe you guys can be the judge of that yourselves, you know, for yourselves, thinking about how you guys feel about these stories that we're going to tell you today. Be sure to leave a comment down below, you know, literally saying that, you know, we'd love to kind of strike a discourse with everybody to see what you guys are kind of feeling and how these things make you feel and the things that they invoke inside of you. Once again, as always, too, if you like what we're doing here at the Arcane Archive, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, you know, share it with your friends or anyone else you think might enjoy it. We appreciate any and all support immensely that you can provide. But with that, I do think that we are set to go. Samuel, if you'd like to start us off with the day.
What are you, my dad?
I mean, I might
Jesus.
be. You never know.
You've met my father.
I have. He's a wonderful man.
He looks just like me.
You do, actually. You guys look uncannily
well, it's the other way around.
similar.
It's the other way around. Yeah, I'll start us off. I'm keeping it. I'm the lighthearted one today, which is funny because in real life I'm not.
Yeah, you've got your moments for sure. I guess you could be more of the dour one, I guess. But yeah, but that's why, hey, you know, we thought it'd be funny. I'm gonna be the one giving you a little bit more of the, you know, the dampy vibes here. Yeah. But we're gonna try and keep it, you know, of course, relatively balanced out, and we're gonna try and I already promised I was gonna do my best not to cry, but you know, you never know. You just never know with these. But by all means,
I'll start us off by a story by listlessly lost. I got it. Main character syndrome, the game. This isn't exactly the worst D&D experience, but it was pretty bad for me and made me just not want to be a part of this party anymore afterwards. Mostly due to one player, everyone else was amazing. I'm not the greatest at the game, but I do enjoy just having a lighthearted, brief encounters in the sessions I play, mostly to ease away from just having the most serious campaigns. I get it. I've DM'd once before, and that was an improv campaign that my classmates and friends enjoyed on the off days of my other friends' campaign. I gave that context for the story I have today, in which, oh, Jesus Christ. When I read this myself, I skipped over the terrible grammar. I was going with my sister to one of her friends' groups session, most of them being much older and in their late to mid 20s.
Could definitely stand to use maybe some punctuation,
or just rearrange their sentences.
Punctuation would help with that a lot, I think. Yeah. But you know, it's Reddit. A lot of people don't really use punctuation.
To be fair.
In all fairness.
Yeah. I was just going in to be an NPC follower that they have had already, which was pretty much a half-elf cleric multi-classed into a bard. She was a very kind and timid character and wasn't the best at confrontation on the surface, but could do pretty well being the party's mediator, which was composed of a human fighter warlock, main player of this issue, a tiefling rogue / mage, a jovial troublemaker, a dwarven barbarian artificer, my brother-in-law, and finally a homebrew race archer, no multi-classing, the DM's wife who wasn't getting any special treatment, luckily. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, he's using weird words there.
I don't
For
think
those
English
of you at
language,
home,
okay.
we are trying to paraphrase a little bit here, just to make it a little bit
otherwise I'd
streamlined. Yeah, otherwise it'd be difficult to. Yeah, English also might not be the first language, so
yeah, I'm glad.
Bear with us, everybody.
I'm glad I just took them because I'd be fucking confused right now. There's a bit more context for the campaign. It's a homebrew campaign that the DM worked very hard on and planned very well for things to go awry. When we had started the campaign, I was with the rogue and barbarian going around town, essentially babysitting them, babysitting the rogue while the barbarian acted as our muscle, as the party was split doing errands before they set out for their dragon slaying quest. Awesome, very classic fantasy.
Hey, who doesn't love to go slay a dragon if they need to?
Um,
It's great fun.
I was going through various stalls, getting rations, and stopping the rogue from stealing, when I asked the DM what he thought of me making a persuasion check for getting a bakery from a sleazy noble who was upcharging the prices of everything. He allowed it. When I'd asked the noble the price, he said he'd sell the bakery for 3 platinum pieces. I, in turn, rolled a persuasion check, got a nat 20, in which I asked if I could buy it for just 1 gold coin. This is a bakery, by the way.
Yeah, the full bakery,
The
not
full
not
bakery.
a baked
Nope.
treat or
No, no,
something. A
no.
full
A
actual
full
bakery.
business. The
Yeah.
noble, who the DM admitted wasn't very charismatic, failed his check and sold me the bakery. Oh boy, this is just the beginning. We were going to be in this town for a while, so side money wasn't a bad idea, and it was intended to be a very long campaign. I then reduced the prices to a much fairer standard and made bank. This wasn't known to the fighter, as they were being micro DM'd by the wife whose character was resting due to a poisoning from a previous session with said dragon. Okay. So this is like kind of a split session currently. Um,
So okay.
this is where the session got really fun. The fighter was one of those people who didn't listen to other characters and just made plans on his own. Wasn't very enjoyable in my opinion, but it was fine with the DM and I put up with it. I'm just gonna put out here, just as a reminder to the people listening at home. This is a guest to their session. This is not someone who normally plays. OP is playing a DMPC that exists outside of them being part of this game. Just as a reminder. Uh, oh, we kind of did a little bit of a time skip for a few weeks, and the bakery had earned me over 5 platinum, and the fighter had blown all his money on helmets of short teleportation due to a plan he had conducted for the dragon, and no one wanted to give him any money because he had failed in past sessions. I came up with a brilliant idea to offer the fighter a trade. 1 platinum coin if you listen to my plan. He begrudgingly agreed. I simply wanted to go along for the
Along. Mm.
dragon slaying quest and have him listen to one suggestion when the fight had started. Me and the DM hatched a plan that I would get a helmet and the fighter wouldn't, in which I could attempt to befriend the adult green dragon, and if I failed, I'd teleport out with the helmet and the fight would ensue as normal. Basically, they're trying to have some sort of parlay with the dragon before just fighting. Which,
It's
fine.
not the word. I mean, and from context clues, I think
For
we can make a decent assumption that the dragon is a green dragon from
indeed,
being
which
poisoned. So it's actually not the worst plan. Green dragons would be far more open to actively parlaying or
depending on what the
communicating.
parlay was for. Um, but nonetheless, we will talk about that after.
Yep.
The fighter didn't take this very well when we got into position before attempting to kill the dragon. As he put it, but I'm the hero. I can't let that happen. You're a frail cleric that can't even offer the dragon anything in return. It's best to put this here, but the fighter never even bothered to look at the sheet I was using, in which the only other language that I knew was Draconic. I then took his helmet, twisting his whole main character shtick, saying he couldn't back out of this. Then I apprehensively approached the dragon and offered it a simple but large cart of pastries and gold. I made another persuasion check and just barely got the dragon to agree to accept my gift and listen. I offered it to become lord of a rather large village in the south if it would simply become my ally in a time of need. I agreed it could occasionally still come to the kingdom to obtain its taxes for this. I ensured I would try my best to make amends between it and the king who sought its head. This threw the nearly 30-year-old fighter into a tantrum, uh, with him saying that he wanted the fame and glory of slaying the dragon. Me and the DM were laughing that our plan to make the fighter have a slight inconvenience, as while I did conspire with the DM, we didn't go against the dice at all. This was how, in the next few short months, the Green Dragon had become a lord of the land to the south of the kingdom we were in and received gifts from the king on a yearly basis. as it mainly needed to do all it really needed to do was watch over the fields of grain my bakery thrived off of and not poison the land. This is also how the once timid NPC who was mainly there for healing became a bakery tycoon and a wealthy noble that was friends with the Green Scourge of the South, and is now also the main way the party is earning money even to this day. The fighter ended up fighting with the group about the fairness of me, a one-time player, ruining his plan of trying to kill a dragon and earning the weapon of the kingdom, which by the way was a dragon's bane that was later given to, I don't know what that means, BNL, someone else, as the fighter got a better weapon later anyways. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, but I don't remember much about the specifics as this was 7 years ago. I'm just going to put out here right now, we have talked about this many times, that's not how persuasion checks work. Look,
No.
we have made a video on this already, and I've actually talked with my dad about this because he has asked me questions about D&D because he played back in like first and second edition.
Mm-hmm.
And dragons were a little bit less complex back then, lore wise.
Fair, which was, it's understandable.
And he watches Critical Role, so we always talk about like he's like, oh, well, what about these gods or about this or about that, and so I will give him lore stuff from 5e. And one of the things we talked about was dragons recently, and I used a lot of the stuff that we learned from our dragon video, one of our first videos. While this isn't entirely impossible, I do not think that this would be enough for a green dragon. What even if it was enough, and I think if it was enough, that's fine. Giving that much player agency to a temporary player to completely change a campaign when they were only there for like a session or two, and like also go against a player that has been a staple in your game seems a little bit weird to me.
There's a lot about this. Agreed. Like I agree with everything you just said, and there's a lot about this that just seems kind of sus to me. I mean, even to your point, like one of the biggest things that I also notice is like I could see that the offering that the OP made to a green dragon, I could absolutely see a green dragon take it. The thing that I would say though is that green dragon taking that offering would be specifically because they had a much larger plan in mind later on to probably, betray this so-called king and take all more shit and more power for themselves. Like this isn't, green dragons are not going to like be cool and kind with people. They're going to manipulate. They're literally going to probably betray and to cajole, and they're going to try to seize power. And so I don't even understand why they believe that they should make, and maybe again, I don't know, maybe in this particular world, the GM has kind of switched up how green dragons function, and that they function, just more whatever, and that, there can be
100% possible.
exceptions. There could be exceptions to every rule. Don't get me wrong. And if that's the case, okay, but again, if you have any real understanding of dragons and kind of normally how they are intended to kind of work and function in the game, this kind of thing would only be a setup for like much more terrible, horrible things down the way. You do not want to screw with a green dragon almost in any way, shape, or form, because you are almost always going to be betrayed at some point, and you can almost always count that they will try to manipulate and seize any kind of power or moment to make themselves more powerful. Like it.
Yeah, I mean, like that's what kind of tipped me off. The moment I started reading this and I realized it was a green dragon they were interacting with, I was
they're
like,
literally poison. Like they're like snakes in the grass. It's
yeah,
like,
they're literal. They're if subterfuge was a proficiency,
yeah,
they'd have double expertise in it.
that's their thing, and they get really good at it, and they can learn. They're also one of the, like, of the chromatics, they're usually the most common to learn magic and all kinds of other stuff. I will also say too is like apparently one of the stipulations was like, oh, the green dragon can stay there and get a stipend or get a tax or whatever. Normally you don't want to pay a dragon a tax for shit, because they'll just keep asking for more stuff. That's literally usually them being tyrannical. That's a red dragon's thing.
Yeah, I think they're mixing their dragons together. Like, so there is something to be said for offering the dragon ostensibly a safe place. right?
Oh yeah.
The dragon now can change how it lives its life. It doesn't have to be worried about people trying to come kill it, whatever. And it has some form of power. It gets, it basically gets fed for free.
Gets
Doesn't have to worry,
treasure, you know.
So like if it had any other exploits or things it wanted to do, it would have plenty of time to do that. Green dragons are probably one of the only dragons who study.
Yep.
Um,
For the most part.
well, like except for metallics, but like for the chromatic dragons, they're probably the only one that would be, you know, uh down to like study magics or study ancient things. So I guess time would be a good convincer for like, oh, okay, so I don't have to worry about people
That's what I'm saying.
trying to
Yeah,
come kill me.
just I'm just getting free resources to
But
basically not. But the issue
but
being though is you can't trust a
no,
green dragon that they wouldn't eventually do some again. And that's not another huge big aspect that I think that they are completely overlooking as well. Literally, one of the stipulations was the dragon can stay there so long as they don't poison the land. I got news for you. That dragon's sheer presence alone is going to start poisoning the area and literally their territory. That's what dragons do. It's like one of the biggest aspects of them as creatures and beings is they are so suffused with magic and elemental power. The older and stronger they are, the longer they stay in any area, the more that area is going to start reflecting their nature and element.
yeah,
And if it's a poison dragon,
unless they made their lair far away and just came to collect, which that's a possibility, I think, realistically speaking.
Possibly.
But really, in terms of I'm trying to make a deal, yes, green dragons are probably the most susceptible chromatic dragon to deal making. Um, you'd have to have something over them, like actually something over them, not something that they want, kind of, not a slight opportunity to have an easier life. You need to have it'd have to be like blackmail, really.
Yeah.
Or they have to have some sort of weird interest in you in another way.
Yeah,
I
you'd have to either, like Sam said, be able to blackmail, or you would essentially have to present a big enough threat to the dragon for it to leave, so that it's not, because that's one thing about poison dragons. They are, I wouldn't say they're necessarily cowards, but they might be considered like the most maybe one of the most cowardly of the chromatics, because they're like they do not want to take a risk for them dying. All chromatic dragons, to be fair, are inherently cowardly in the sense of they care about their self-preservation usually above anything, right?
Mhm.
Except for maybe reds. Reds are the only ones that might just say fuck it.
Well, their arrogance consumes them.
Yeah, exactly.
And
They
white
cannot believe that they are weaker than anything else, even if they actually might know it. They still will not accept it.
Yeah, I would say the ones who are least likely to retreat are black and red.
Blue. Well,
No,
black's
blue will retreat. Blue, because blue, their whole point of blue is they
That's
attack
true.
people,
They
retreat to their lair, wait for
yeah.
people to fall into their lair.
They
because
like
they can't get
guerrilla
back out.
tactics. Yeah, they
Yeah.
like
Black
guerrilla
dragons.
tactics.
Black dragons are brutal, so they kind of bank on people being so afraid that they could never possibly
But that's the
get
thing,
attacked.
though.
But they can be.
Black dragons know that they're one of the weaker ones usually. So if they know that they like to torture and they like to like invoke fear and get those reactions. But if someone is legitimately strong enough to contend with them,
Oh, that's fair. You're right.
they usually probably won't fuck with them. I think really the only ones that won't fight.
Red.
I mean, I will say I think it might be white and red, because whites aren't smart enough to do that. Whites, they're more animalistic.
They're bestial, but fight or flight's a real thing.
It's
Fight
true.
I mean, it's more pure than any emotion that even we have as people now.
You're not wrong.
That flight response is real. I mean, in my opinion, how I would run it, red is definitely the one that wouldn't run, because they're like, well, I can't die here. There's no way.
There's no I'm
if they're
too
younger.
Strong. Yeah, if they're younger, they're not stupid. Again, no dragon is an idiot, obviously, but
except white dragons.
They're not stupid. They're not as smart as the rest. Technically, white dragons have about the same intelligence as like normal people is the thing. They usually just pretend, they usually prefer to be more bestial because it's, but we went off on a bit of a tangent on dragons there. Can you tell how much we like dragons and this stuff here? But point being is, there's a lot of questionable things about this whole story here, especially I think I really did like, to Sam's point, how we pointed out before, the comment down below, the top voted comment says, so this GM thinks a charisma skill is essentially, I can tell anyone to do anything that I want with a high enough roll. I'm sorry, but you are a bad player and the GM is an idiot for allowing it. I knew this from the moment that I read I talked the sale of the entire bakery from 3 platinum pieces to 1 gold moment that he read. Again, for those of you who might not have as much context, 1 platinum piece would be the same as 10 gold pieces. So 3 platinum pieces would be essentially 30 gold pieces, to which the OP apparently was able, with even with a nat 20, to talk them down to
90%. 90% discount.
1 gold piece out of technically what would be 30. Quite frankly, I'll be honest with you, a whole bakery might even be worth more than that, potentially. I don't know exactly what the location they were in terms of the economy. If maybe it was like a smaller village.
I think it was like a
I think
stall.
it was like a smaller, I think it was a smaller village, and it may have been like a bakery stall. So maybe 30 gold would have made sense. But either way, that's still astronomically crazy how anyone could possibly convince a legit, literal business person who has apparently been doing this for a while to sell their stall, stand, bakery, building, whatever, that they initially priced it at 30 gold for 1 gold. That's insane. So the commenter continues and then goes like, and then after that, the story just kept getting worse. Mostly because you, the OP, decided to main character this game that you butted yourself into for approximately 1 session. And the icing on this entire shit cake that you have made is that you claim that this was a bad experience for you. And I do think that does sum this whole thing up quite well. OP, if you ever see this video and read this, I gotta tell you, my friend, like, you kind of came off as a bit of an asshole here. Now, I will say it's not all on you. The GM also seemed to kind of be a bit of a dick as well. Just like, because like, I get it. Don't get me wrong. The way that you highlighted or showcased how, if the fighter really did say all of this stuff and acted in this way, that's definitely some main character syndrome. That's a problem and an issue. But you also literally came in there and just straight main character syndromed yourself as well, with all of this. Like, did you at any point ask any of the rest of the party? Maybe they already apparently had an encounter with this dragon already. Maybe had some personal it seemed like maybe a lot of them may have wanted to fight and kill this dragon straight up, which wouldn't have been a bad decision at all, considering it's a green dragon. And you kind of just literally bogarted the entire narrative and were like, I'm gonna basically take the thing you took, I'm gonna take the helmet, and I'm gonna go in there, and then I'm gonna just, try to talk to it. Even though it's like,
I love these comments, dude. It's insane. And the fact that OP has not responded to anything except for 1 comment and got downvoted for it. So many red flags here reading this and the comments. A system where you get XP based on damage and kills, that not only heavily penalizes support classes, but also makes every encounter where the party infights to get the most XP. Horrible system. A nat 20 causing someone to sell their whole livelihood for 1 gold. You, a one-time player, completely ruining a player's plan as an NPC and solo-handedly causing a huge plot point. This is a horror story, but not in the way you think it is. And then someone after, you are the one with main character syndrome. I'll make this quick, just because I've had this experience before of being a NPC, like being a guest player in a game for literally 1 session. Yes, you can do something to change the story, leave your mark on a game, but you have to do it in a way that doesn't disrupt the story that these people are going to continue to play through. I did it once. I had a character who was like a guide for a group, brought him to this place. We got attacked by somebody. We were outgunned, and my character was like, all right, I'll hold them off and y'all run. And it ended with me attacking the bad guy, and the session ended. It was like a cliffhanger session. And of course, I was gonna be around for the next one, and my character ended up dying, like fighting, going down, and the players they ran, and because of this, whatever it was, my speech, my
I'm gonna say I always love this
determination,
story because it really is
they
heartwarming.
decided to regroup, turn around, and they fucking murked that dude and all their
Yeah,
guys, and
they they
revived my
rallied.
character. They rallied, revived my character. Like at the end of that session, they were ready to run, and I
Yeah,
was like, and I looked at the four of them across this coffee table that we were
yeah,
playing on, and I'm like,
go.
you have more to do. Like
Yeah, yeah, go.
yeah.
Fly,
I
you
was
fools,
yeah.
fly.
I was an ancestral guardian
Turned around
barbarian. I
to
was
fight
like,
the ball
I'm
run.
ready. Well, I was ancestral guardian barbarian. I was ready to die at any time. I was like,
Yep.
my family spirits will welcome me. Run.
Mm-hmm.
And I went down exactly how the character would.
Yeah.
And they came back, killed the guy, revived my character. He was an NPC for the rest of the game. And it was like, yeah, I think that's how you do it. You don't change a story. You don't completely fuck over the
No, you
players.
don't. I mean, you don't try to
You give them
intervene.
an
Like,
opportunity to maybe think about it.
I mean, I think this also comes into play of like you should know what game you're getting into, right? Even if you're just going to be a guest NPC or a guest player for a bit, like you should know what is the vibe, what is the overall, kind of theme and energy of the party and the game, right? So then you can then, as Sam has done, better fit yourself into the vibe instead of going in there and completely disregarding the existing vibe and just being like, yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead. I'm just gonna upchuck all over this with my own personal shit and stuff. And I'm gonna leave a huge lasting impression of events and your world just so you guys remember me forever. Thanks. Have a great one. And then fade away. Like, honestly, I found the OP has responded to a number of these comments down here. And almost every time they have responded, they have gotten downvoted to oblivion like multiple times. It's unfortunate here because literally, yeah, like they are lambasting the OP here. And I don't know if we need to act like literally rake OP over the coals at this much because it's like, yeah, look, OP maybe was acting a little bit holier than thou, a little bit, presumptuous, maybe a bit arrogant as well. But uh, again, it is also true, as I said before, if what OP is saying about the fighter absolutely is about probably a bit of a problem too. Shouldn't have him acting in that particular way. Unless of course like the dragon was like, had a specific like connection to the fighters, like background or something. Like maybe it was a dragon that destroyed his village back in the day or something. He had a personal grudge or vendetta, then that would be different. But overall, like I know another comment also highlights and says like so you butted into an existing party as a one-time guest character, stole a fighter's item he spent all his money on, and completely derailed the plan they'd been setting up. Yeah, you're an arsehole, mate. And then another comment says like, hey, don't forget about the stopping the rogue from stealing. That's a big red flag if I ever saw one. I'd say maybe that one isn't as big a thing, but either way, still, the OP then responds and says, context. The last time the rogue had stolen, and I was informed of this, which is why the barbarian was with us, was because he almost ended the campaign because they all almost died by execution. So, and then another person, and then that got downvoted like 55 times. And then the another comment says like, well, maybe do not have punishment of stealing being immediate death, which, depends on what you steal. Like I said, I do feel like there should be consequences and risk in that. It's kind of the point of that. If you're going to steal, you kind of gotta, but I will say, I don't think everybody there shouldn't be corporal punishment for that. Just because one person stole doesn't mean everybody should then be executed. Like, that's ridiculous. Yeah, so I will say, I think the highest voted thing that the OP got, as people are like literally going, OP then responds again to the previous thing about, you butted into the party and literally goes like, did you read it or not? because everyone enjoyed me there and everyone enjoyed what I had done. I didn't steal any item. The fighter got a better one, and the barbarian got the kingdom weapon because the fighter didn't need it. You half read the story, then insulted me. I added fun to a semi-serious campaign that's still going on today. And I didn't butt in. I got invited, offered to play an already integrated character that the GM had wanted more added to it, and I did exactly that. And the helmet I borrowed for a one-time encounter and paid the fighter for it. And it wasn't a group plan. It was a plan that excluded every single other player outside of the fighter. And by the way, he didn't spend all his money on just one item. He bought items for the entire party for a plan that had a good chance of failing. He wanted them to be distraction while he took the kill. It's an XP-based campaign. I still receive regular updates on the game, and none of them are mad at what had happened. I took what a person who has always got what he wanted and turned it on its head, and the party has not done worse for what I've done, and it's made it better. The only way I see you interpreting that I just ruined everything is if you relate to the fighter in the worst ways possible. Go back and actually read what had happened. I had a failsafe that would have been reliant on the fighter if it failed, but instead you half read and assumed get your facts straight. Yeesh. I mean, I'm just saying, like, I'm saying, bro, like I said, I don't necessarily think that OP needs to be lambasted, but at the same time, OP, when you respond with this, like, you do have to, again, at least acknowledge a little bit about how you kind of came across in this thing here, at least maybe based off of what you displayed. And it is also true, regardless of maybe you didn't communicate it properly, but it is still true that you were kind of inserting a lot of your own personal shit into things without necessarily considering or asking the party. I mean, you're telling us the party apparently is fine or even enjoyed and liked what you did, but it's like, again, it comes across in a very kind of holier than thou, like, I brought fun and lightheartedness to this otherwise serious game and it needs it. It's like that. I mean, like, even if the GM himself asked you to do that, the GM isn't the only one playing. It's not just the GM's game, even though they are the GM. And it's like, again, it's kind of a thing of like, you should feel the vibe out, and you can't just basically be like, well, I feel like this game needs this, so then I'm gonna do this thing. Like, if you're not part of the actual, I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm not quite trying to explain. I feel like I'm not doing a good job of kind of explaining what I'm trying to get across here. I guess overall, what I'm trying to say is I feel like maybe you were a bit too overzealous, putting it nicely, in your approach here, and maybe you should take a little bit of a step back and, like, to Sam's point, the game is still about those players. You're here as a guest, so your role here is to still help the GM heighten the experience and the play of the main cast, of the main party, right? You're there as a enhancement. You're there as a supporter, even if you're a barbarian or a cleric or whatever else. Like, and I get it, wanting to, like, maybe leave a lasting impression or do something really cool and memorable, but when you do shit like this where you kind of forced it, I don't know. Because even then, I will say this only all happened obviously because the GM allowed it to. So maybe, to OP's point, apparently the GM and him, or the GM and the OP colluded, literally colluded, to make all of this happen. So honestly, again, that's also why I feel like you can't necessarily blame OP a ton, because the GM is kind of the biggest instrumental thing that allows this to kind of happen. But any other thoughts you have on this one, bud?
No, that's all for me.
Cool. What's that? Let's move on. That was that was one of the first the first story of the day too, y'all. So hey, buckle up. Now we're gonna take a little bit of a 180 here. It's still lighthearted, still funny for this one for sure. Just kind of due to the irony of the situation, but this one's gonna be a little bit more dour. So this story is titled Problem Player Starts PvP in-game, then PvP in real life by Mechanic in number 9776. Sorry if this is long, but I've been holding on to this story for a little while now. This story happened about 10 months ago, but I recently started a new year of D&D Club and got some inspiration to write this. Before the story starts, there is a trigger warning for violence, bullying, and some creepy behavior. So let's start with the major people in the story. Also, I think just as a heads up to you guys, I believe this is a story that other RPG horror story channels have also read before in the past, and some people commented on this, and the OP has said that this was their story originally, and that they had posted it to like other r slash whatever for those people to read, and it wasn't stolen. Just as a disclaimer, I guess. Either way, but anyways, to start, let's start with the major people in the story. There is me, the GM. There is Bard, one of my friends and one of the first people to join my group. There is Druid, another one of my friends who joined later. And the problem player, who I will call Brandon, also a bard and joined early-ish. There are more players in the group, but they are not as relevant to the story. With that out of the way, there is some additional context required. I have known all the main characters since elementary school. Brandon has always had pretty bad anger issues, and he gets really angry very easily and is usually quite difficult to get calmed down once he starts going off. He did get better towards the end of elementary school and the start of middle school, but when COVID hit, he did seem to calm down and get better control over his emotions overall. That is, until people found out about his issues with controlling his anger. It also didn't help that he is socially awkward and liked things that people thought were cringy. And in middle school, well, that was basically a social death sentence. He was ruthlessly bullied and provoked, and no one did anything about it. His teachers didn't help either. So I had a class with him that he was already struggling in, and he would always get sat next to the people who most actively bullied him. No matter how many times he would have meltdowns in the middle of class or directly ask to be moved to a different seat, the teacher would just always sit them together. It was so bad that one time a girl pretended to date him, and he only found out that it was a prank after he saw her kiss her real boyfriend. They were really horribly awful to him for absolutely no reason. And this sent him back years of trying to get better. And so, before everything else, I will genuinely say that I feel bad for him, and I don't think he deserved any of that. But with that out of the way, let's get on to the main part of the story. So, last year, I joined my high school's D&D club. I already had a group of my friends that were going to play with me, and the group was already a little on the larger size with 6 people. But there were some players without groups, and that included Brandon. There weren't enough GMs, so each group had to take at least one extra player, and surprise, I ended up having to take Brandon. I was hesitant at first because I knew about his anger issues, and I knew it was only a matter of time before something happened. He was basically like a ticking time bomb, and unfortunately, I didn't know how right I would be. My group was already halfway through character creation when he finally joined us. One of my players, Bard, had already gotten most of his sheet done and just needed to pick out spells. I told the group it would be good to have more role diversity, as most of the characters were squishy backliners with only one barbarian as the melee combatant with more than 11 health. Even after that, Brandon still wanted to play as a bard, and as much as I encouraged him to play something else, to not have repeats, and because bard is also a rather difficult class for first-time players, he still insisted and wanted to play bard, which it wasn't really a big deal, but it was a little bit of a preview of some of the combativeness that was to come. During our session zeros, yes, multiple, I laid out my boundaries with certain content and explained my 3-strike rule as I have dealt with problem players before. One of this would be sex and romance. I was fine if players wanted to romance NPCs or other players if it was consensual, but that I did not want any sexual content in my game besides an occasional joke that wasn't too graphic. Brandon audibly sighed. When I asked him about his character and backstory, he said he was a tiefling bard who was the best in the land, but had had a bad, kind of tragic backstory with discrimination. A little basic, but it didn't sound too bad. That is, until he brought up his motivation for adventuring. He said something along the lines of, I want to get a hot, submissive girlfriend and sleep with every woman that we meet. And I told him that I was no way okay with that, as per the no sexual content rule that I had laid out before. And he got mad and started to push back, but I stood my ground and I did not allow it. Eventually, he relented and tried to come up with something else. And as I mentioned earlier, he was new to D&D, so he also needed some extra help during character creation. I helped him as much as I could, but I had other players that also needed help. So I sent him all the resources he would need to have his character done by the next session. So the session rolls around and he has failed to do anything new at all for his sheet. Absolutely nothing. Most of the other players were ready to play except for some spells or skill proficiencies here or there. And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, whatever. While he finishes a character, I can explain the lore of my world and other players can also finish up their sheets. And by the time that is done, club is just about over because it is only 2 hours per meet. Next week, we all get to club, and guess what? Brandon's sheet is still empty besides the basic parts I already helped him with. At this point, people are ready to play, and I want to start, but instead, I need to start making his character sheet for him because he just won't do it himself. So before I sent him to finally finish up, I made sure that he understood how to fill everything out and even sent him some YouTube videos to help him out. But he still just wouldn't do it. That, my friends, was strike number 1. Strike number 2 was his behavior while playing. He would constantly talk over me and the other players to say something completely unrelated or to say an unfunny joke that made everybody uncomfortable. He would also metagame like crazy, which is somewhat understandable for a new player, sure, but he would never stop even when people brought it up. And whenever I told him that he couldn't do something or be somewhere because of that, he would get mad. He was really argumentative and couldn't handle being told no. The first thing he did in-game was try to hit on a waitress in a tavern. I told him no, because the way he wanted to go about it would break the no sexual content rule, and he got mad, even after I explained why. He would get unreasonably angry whenever he rolled poorly as well. Finally, and in my opinion, one of the most annoying things he did would be calling out other players for talking. I understand that he was trying to help me, but it just made my job harder because my players would have a small conversation about homework, and he would stop the entire game to tell me as if I didn't see it happening literally 5 feet away from me. I really do not like hypocrites, and he really started to push my buttons by interrupting me for no reason other than to say that something about Hell of a Boss or Friday Night Funkin', both of which no one in my group either watched or played. But then started to act like everyone else was awful and always interrupting while they were having a quiet conversation about whatever test or homework they had that day, and then acting like he wasn't the problem at all and everybody else was. This behavior led to resentment from other players, and I began to think of a way to let him down gently as I was getting really fed up of the constant interruptions and blatant metagaming. Still, none of this was as bad as what was about to come. For about a third of the way through the game, my friend Druid joined. And one thing about Druid is that he can be very blunt. If you do something he thinks is annoying, he will tell you to your face. It is a respectable trait, but it has gotten him into trouble before, and this brought him into conflict with Brandon. Druid would tell Brandon to just be quiet and that people didn't really care about some of the things he would talk about, and that they would rather focus on the session than hear about whatever roadblocks game he was playing. This made Brandon really dislike him, and they would butt heads often, and it came to a boiling point when Brandon challenged Druid to an in-game fight. Now, everyone told him that he shouldn't do it because the fight was practically unwinnable for him. He was a level 2 bard with only support spells, with his only damage output being daggers and only around 17 HP max. His opponent, on the other hand, was a level 2 moon druid and with about 20 health and a bear wild shape. He stood no chance, but he didn't seem to care, and Druid still agreed to a fight. And we all agreed that any death would not count and that this was a separate thing from the campaign. They also agreed that there would be no hard feelings and that the fight would just be to let off some steam. Now, in hindsight, I should have seen that that wasn't the case, and I should not have allowed PvP. And I do take partial blame for what happens next. I still feel guilty about it, and I can't change the past. So before the fight, I gave each player a chance to do some preparation, and Bard casted Bane on Brandon. At this point, everyone was sick of Brandon's crap, so no one cared, and Brandon didn't object. We forgot to count the effects of the spell except for his first roll, so it didn't really matter too much. But I had them roll initiative, and Brandon ended up rolling a natural 1. And that roll, ironically, was the only one affected by the Bane spell. But it was a nat 1, so it didn't really do much anyway. Druid ended up wild shaping into a bear, ran over to Brandon, and multi-attacked, rolling a crit on his first bite attack, and also hitting with his claw attack. Somehow, Brandon lived on 2 HP. Now, he tried to attack back with surprisingly, his dagger, of all things, and missed. And then he used his bonus action to healing word himself for 1d4 healing. At this point, he was getting really mad about the way the fight was going. And on the Druid's next turn, he multi-attacked again, surprise, surprise. However, he missed his bite attack, but funny enough, he crit on his claw attack. This brought Brandon to 0. And the way that I play the game, if you get knocked down by a crit, you auto-fail a death save.
Oof.
This pissed Brandon off. He still had to roll death saves, and Druid just stopped attacking at that point, but no one went to stabilize him. He succeeded 2 saves and failed 1, bringing it down to the final wire of 1 roll. He rolled his final save, and it was a nat 1. This sent him into an absolute rage. He started screaming and yelling and punching the walls. At my school, the walls are solid concrete, but he just kept punching the wall over and over and over. Now, Bard, even though, he's playing a Bard, is a really nice guy and was able to get Brandon to calm down enough to walk to a water fountain around the corner. Now, while they were walking, Bard was trying to help him calm down, saying that it was just a game. The death wasn't canon to the actual game, and that the fight was basically unwinnable anyways. That last comment apparently set Brandon off again, and he tried to strangle Bard. Funny enough, another thing about Brandon is that he is really short and scrawny. Probably about 5'3" and about 140 pounds-ish, give or take. And for comparison, Bard is about average weight and 5'11". So Brandon could barely reach up to Bard's neck, and Bard was able to push him away relatively easily. Now, keep in mind, I couldn't see this happening at the time, because I was doing crowd control with the other players, so I didn't know what was happening. But Druid saw what happened because he was going over to apologize to Brandon because he felt bad about the whole scenario. After Bard finally pushed him off, Brandon ran over, grabbed his backpack, and said he had to go. Bard and Druid came back after a bit and told me what happened, and I knew right at that point what I had to do. The next day at lunch, I went over to Brandon to talk. I was worried that he would potentially attack me, so I made sure I was somewhere people could see if anything happened. I let him down as easily as I could, saying that I couldn't allow him back into the group and that I would have to tell the club leaders about what happened. I told him that I might be able to get him a second chance with another group, but that I would tell the GM why I kicked him. The next session, he showed up to the club and he asked if I could help to try and get him into another group. I agreed, but I told him that I was going to tell the GM the entire story of why I kicked him, and if he didn't allow Brandon, then I wouldn't help to try to convince the GM otherwise. Surprisingly, the GM did agree to take him in and give Brandon a second chance. And while I told the teacher what happened, the first thing Brandon tried to do was sleep with a robotic dragon. He got kicked from that group too immediately. After talking with the teacher, Brandon was formally kicked and banned from the entire club as a whole. And the next day, he came up to me at lunch and had the audacity to ask if I thought he could possibly go back next year. I looked him in the eyes and I straight up told him, no, they won't let you back next year or the year after that. You attacked someone and you really think that they will let you back after that? No, They won't be letting you back ever. I really wish that I had kicked him earlier, and I feel really bad about letting any of this happen because I know it is also on me as much as it is on him. The campaign didn't get finished and we couldn't play over summer. So this year, the day is different and conflicts with my player schedules keep cropping up. So most of them can't really play anymore. And so the game ended up kind of just fizzling out. No real happy ending for this story, just some crazy stuff that happened because of D&D. TLDR, problem player challenges another player to an in-game fight, leading to an outburst where he attacks someone else outside of game. Edit. As I stated at the top, some of you guys recognize the story from a Crispy's Tavern video, and that is because it is the same story. I sent it to his email a while ago and forgot about it until I saw it in the video. Thanks for trying to make sure it isn't stolen, but I can assure you guys it isn't. Shout out to Crispy's Tavern. It's actually, he makes a lot of really great content. But that is end of the post. So, what do you think about this one, buddy? Right off the top.
Well, there is no excuse for physical violence in real life because of D&D, unless there's one outside thing to that, unless it's like weird sexual stuff, and you tell someone, hey, don't do that, and then they do it again, and you're like, hey, don't do that. Because like that isn't just because that can become abuse. It's an emotional abuse. It's a verbal sexual abuse. Like if I told someone, hey, don't do that, or if someone was having like a trauma issue and you're just like pushing it like that on purpose, you kind of deserve to get your ass kicked. But no other instance in all of the stories we read have I thought, yeah, the answer to this is physical violence. As much as I would love it to be, don't get me wrong.
I feel you. I'm there with you.
I've spent my fair share of times in crappy dive bars at 3 a.m. where violence is the only option. It's not it's not what I prefer, especially for a hobby like this, which is supposed to be about enjoying yourself away from reality a little bit. Um, Obviously they're in school at the time, which
Yeah, they're high schoolers at this point.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
But no offense, there isn't like an excuse for this. I feel bad for the guy, the anger issues, the bullying, all that kind of stuff. Fine. It's a rough thing, but as someone who's bullied, as someone who had to go through shit like that, attacking the people who are willing to give you a shot socially seems like a bit of a mixed bag here. Obviously the one guy who is a little more blunt is blunt, and sometimes you have to deal with people like that, and you might not like them. Sucks. You might not like them. There is no reason to react this way. And I get it. Anger is anger. Anger issues are anger issues. I've had my moments too. Nothing to this point. Not like this. Because at the end of the day, it's just a tabletop game.
it's a game.
It can mean a lot more than that.
Yeah, 100%.
But at the end of the day, when you're sitting there, it is a game.
Nothing has actually happened.
If things go bad, they go bad. You stop and regroup. You don't need to take it out of the game. Again, unless someone's doing like weird abusive shit. But like that's not what this was. That's not what this was at all. That guy has a lot of growing to do, and I'm glad he's not doing it in your D&D session, because that's not where it needs to happen. That needs to happen in real life, in where actual growing is done. I wish him the best, just in the sense of like that's a tough stick to draw in terms of the social hierarchy of like high school and middle school and
Elementary school, even.
Yeah, I mean, hell, as someone who went through middle school being relentlessly bullied and then got to high school and basically grew a foot and went, all right, we're not doing this anymore. And I basically threatened people to leave me alone, and then eventually I didn't have to anymore. It sucks. It's a sucky situation to be in. So I get the anger and I get the rash decision making. But no offense, whether you're an adult, a teenager, a child, things like games and these collaborative efforts that we put this time into have no space for stuff like that. Um, I give OP a lot of respect for even being willing to, instead of just condemning the guy, to
He
being like,
tried.
all right, I'll talk to the teacher, we'll try to get you in another group, like understand that this is your second chance. If you fuck it up, you fuck it up. And he couldn't handle it, right?
He
Um,
tried. He tried to give him a legitimate opportunity and shot. Like he didn't
and
just
and
write him off, even though he
you
could
you
have.
you had every right to, and you probably should have.
Yeah.
Which
I
sucks.
mean,
I think if you act like this, I think you deserve to get written off, despite how other people might have treated you. Unfortunately, that's not how it works in the real world. You don't just get the revenge story trench coat ass people. That's not real. That is not how life works. Um, what I will say is there are some people in the comments talking about like you shouldn't have even let it get to PvP. You acknowledge that, so I think you've learned from this. It sucks that it died out for you in the sense of this club. Hopefully nowadays, because I'm assuming this wasn't like yesterday. Um, I
I think
hope
it's just
that
last
you've,
year.
yeah, like I hope you found other ways to enjoy this hobby. Um, the learning from this is important.
Or no, the story
Uh,
happened yet 10 months, about 10 months ago. So
yeah, I will say, yeah, PvP super slippery slope. You probably should have not allowed it at all. Then again, with that kind of person at the table, I don't know how much you saying no would have mattered realistically to how they reacted. Um, but good rule of thumb, unless everyone at the table at session 0 is like, yeah, PvP is okay. PvP is not. It's don't just
it's
don't. It's not worth it
yeah, like
unless
it
you have a group
like
of people you know really well and they can all put that shit behind them. Because like even the PvP I've had, as little as it's been, is tough, and it took like my evening after that session was like I was like, oh, because I was messaging the guy I was playing with. I'm like, hey, I hope you don't take that personally, like, whatever. But that's only because I know him. Imagine if I did that with a complete stranger. That'd be fucking terrifying. It's not the norm. It shouldn't be the norm, unless you have a group that you trust and they trust you and you know them. But yeah, don't do that again. Um, but
it's just
I cannot blame you for how that person reacted. Not at all. And if
yeah.
anything, the other player basically being like, well, I'm not going to put up with your shit, but I'm also not going to kill you. Maybe not using your normal rules for death saves when it's two players would have been a good idea to avoid death. But yeah, it sucks.
I
It sucks all
mean,
around, but like hopefully you've learned from it. It sounds like you have listening to Adam go over this. It sounds like you've learned from it. It's a tough one, and
yeah.
you can't account for how people are going to react. It's hard, especially in a club setting like this where you're not necessarily all friends, super close outside of the game all the time, and stuff like that. It's difficult.
Well, I mean, I will say he did say that he actually was friends with almost all of these people. Like, so it's like
Yeah,
they're
but friends and knowing how someone's going to react are two different things.
well,
You could be friends
especially
with someone and blindsided by their actions.
that's what I'm saying. Like you, especially with we've read multiple stories where people are where they're just like he's amazing. They're amazing, incredible people outside of the game, but in the game, they're just terrorists. They're absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, the thing that I do see about this is yeah, like for me, I really do feel for this guy in terms of like the shit that uh Brandon went through like in elementary and middle school because just like you like I also was pretty consistently fucked with or bullied when I was younger. And so I definitely feel for him and understand like that kids can be cruel, man, and it really is unfortunate, especially that thing about a girl pretending to date him and then he found out it was a prank after he saw her kiss her act like that. Even when you're I assume at this point like he's in middle school, which so I'm like I don't really see I don't really know if you can really date too much there. But even then at that
And
age,
plenty of kids dated in my middle school.
I know. Like they do. Same thing with my brother's middle school. Hell, it was even either way. Uh that definitely would mess him up. And if he already had anger issues to begin with and problems, I get it. He's apparently also scrawny and short, and so he doesn't feel like he has any power Essentially, it seems pretty clear that he most likely feels he has absolutely no power or control over anything in his life, and that sucks. And especially when a lot of things in your life are kind of just messing with you, they're just poking you, they're just stomping on you, and it's like that sucks. And so yeah, I get the anger issues. I get feeling like, you know, shit is unfair, because life can be unfair. Not always, but it can be a lot. But just like you said, Sammy, I 100% agree, that does not justify or give you the right to act out in a way like this, especially towards people who don't deserve it. I will say, if you wanted to act out that way towards your bullies who are like actively screwing with you, it's like, you know, maybe it's a hot take, maybe not. I wouldn't judge you for that. Sure. Turnabouts for a plate. Like, you know, for me, violence, it's like, well, people don't realize that there can be violence in more than one way, right? He is clearly being preyed upon right now. And for whatever reason, the so-called system or protocols set in place that are supposed to be helping and protecting him are not. The teachers aren't doing anything. No one else seems to be doing anything or caring. So at some point, when is being screwed with and messed around with going to be, you know, enough is enough, and you gotta take matters into your own hands. Now, again, please don't take my words too far in terms of, like, I'm not advocating for, you know, going that route. But I'm simply saying that there is something to be said. Like, if a person is feeling just hopeless and nothing else, because my brother used to also have like some anger stuff when he was younger too, because he also felt very powerless about things. And so I understand this as well, and kind of a lot of where this is coming from. And the issue obviously being, though, yeah, is that, you know, this is a D&D game, man. You're supposed to be having fun. And I get it. You got washed. Everybody told you were going to get washed, though. Everybody told you it was unwinnable. If you're brand new to the game, I get it. You wanted to try and, like, make yourself feel like, okay, I have some control here. And then you just got absolutely curb stomped. That sucks. Like, but the dude was like, you can be frustrated and angry about it. Let it go. It's a game. You're supposed to be having fun with your friends here. This is the whole point of that, was to let off some steam, right? I agree, Sammy, as well. Like, I don't think it was not smart to do it this way, because there was clearly a lot of most of the shit that seemed to be happening was out of game stuff too, between Brandon and Druid. Like, it seemed like most of their issues were out of game, and so you should not solve that in game. But it's also clear that Brandon was just, in a lot of ways, very socially inept and awkward. I mean, maybe he might be on the spectrum to a certain extent too, which also doesn't help with social interaction or being able to control and handle your emotions better too, because you're not maybe, you know, taking extra care to be able to manage yourself, especially if you don't have, like, the issue being here too is obviously he's young.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout all this time, I don't think anybody's really been helping him. So it's like, how can you expect him to manage himself better?
No.
And or even have the opportunity to learn how to manage himself better? I mean, even OP himself said, like, he apparently got better for a while, and then it got worse because people just kept dogging on him for so long. And I don't know. I find it,
Yeah.
I do not agree at all with what he did, but I'm also finding it difficult because I do sympathize and empathize greatly. That it's just like, I understand what it feels like to feel like you're stuck and you can't do anything, and you get that frustration, but there is no excuse for taking it out on someone who does not deserve it. Like, there is no excuse for that. No matter what's happened to you, no matter what's, like, you do not get to dump your shit onto someone else, like, especially in a violent way.
Yeah.
That
No,
they
definitely not.
especially when they're trying to help you, for God's sake. Like,
Yeah.
lashing out is never okay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the circumstance. You should never lash out at somebody who does not deserve it. That is not okay. But it is just, this entire thing is just sad to me. And I will say as well, I give mad props and respect to the GM, because honestly, you handled everything incredibly well, especially again if you're in high school, like goddamn, my friend, if you ever see this video, mad props. I think you are on to really great, bigger and better things, my friend, because everything you did, you had multiple session zeros off the top. You set your boundaries and your limits and your lines and parameters very clearly by the sounds of things. Like you held your ground when he was trying to make this character before, and you were just like, no, I am not gonna do with this concept. Like you I mean, that was beautiful. It was all beautifully done. It was all just like well done, OP, is all I can really say. Um, and yeah, maybe you made some mistakes here or there, but I don't think anyone else could have really done much better in that situation, given what happened. Like you were there and you witnessed a lot of the shit that happened to him, and you wanted to give him, you showed empathy, and you wanted to give him an opportunity to play because if somebody wants to play, then yeah, like I am also of the mind that everybody gets a chance and then a second chance, and then if they fuck it up a third time, then it's like that's where shit starts to be like, okay, this is now becoming, it's not an accident or a exception. It's starting to become the rule now. It's starting to become a habit, and that's a problem. And that's when you need to start squashing that shit immediately. But it really is unfortunate when he clearly just wanted to have some actual control and influence and power over his fate, over his life in the game. He wanted to get, an attractive partner who liked him and did what he wanted, because that's obviously easier than real life, especially after, he was tricked. I mean, oh my God, dude. Can you imagine, like, at that point, if he's in middle school, he's at most what, 12, 13 years old at that
They're
point?
in middle school.
Yeah, it's in middle school when that happens to him. When the girl
Oh yeah, there's no way. How the
like
hell are you
that's
supposed to even know how to deal with that? Like,
like
there's no
that's
way.
that's
There's no
that's
way.
just like, oh my God, dude. Like that. Most adults aren't able to handle that kind of shit. How the hell is like a 12 or 13-year-old, especially you're going through puberty now, or you're just starting to probably go through puberty now, and like all your hormones are raging. Like this whole thing just breaks my heart, really. Because again, like there's no excuse, but at the same time, it's like he just needs help, in my opinion. Like I think Brandon just really needs help. And even afterwards, after everything happened, like apparently Brandon, he didn't lash out at OP. Like he seemed to like understand. He like OP doesn't say like Brandon when OP went to tell him or talk to him about it, like Brandon just seemed to accept it. Like when he got kicked out, he asked OP for help. OP helped him, but he also set the line like, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna tell everybody what happened. I'm gonna be honest. And Brandon didn't seem to fight back with that either. He just seemed to kind of like resolve, like, or resign himself, I should say, not resolve, but resign himself. And it was like, it's sad, man. It just kind of breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts you have on this one, bud?
No, that's all I got. I think.
Yeah. I will say probably just to leave the last thing off, there is a comment down below that's been downvoted for some reason. But the commenter says, this does sound very bad, and this guy deserves to be kicked. But it sounds like you let Druid get away with a lot of nonsense that agitated the situation. Like even before the PvP, which you should have just shut down, but the Druid player is like very blunt, you said, as if that's an excuse for whatever. You probably should have just put a stop to his comments as well, because it sounds like both players are creating a hostile environment, even if one went way too far. Some reason he got downvoted a couple of times, which I feel like what he said isn't unreasonable or unfair. It's like, yeah, I like because again, if OP is very much aware of the fact that Brandon is kind of a ticking time bomb, has anger issues, and you're gonna bring, and he's causing issues and problems kind of for everybody at the table, and then you're gonna bring in this other guy who's a friend who you also know is just very brutally honest or blunt, not even honest, blunt. Like that's gonna be a recipe kind of for some conflict. Like it's gonna happen. And I do think while I also 100% I am always an advocate for complete transparency and brutal honesty for the most part. Like just I'm totally fine with a person being brutally honest. The thing I have contention with potentially though is that there's a difference between being like you can just be brutally honest constructively and progressively, or you can be destructive in your honesty or whatever. About like you can again, I think Druid was maybe being a little bit he was being kind of a dick. Like it's like okay, yeah, for Brandon has some issues and some problems clearly, but the way you go about it is also just as important as what you are trying to convey. Like getting your like the way you're going about conveying your point is just as important as the point itself. Like, and again, to be fair, in that defense, OP does say that they often try to tell Brandon to stop, doing certain things, and he would kind of just keep doing it. And he would just kind of like whatever. So at the same token, maybe it got to a point where Druid was fine with that at first, but because Brandon was not responding to that, to a more, courteous or considerate attempt, at which point, yeah, you kind of just be like, if Brandon is not going to be courteous or considerate or aware enough to receive shit in that same manner, then at that point, yeah, you really do, I can't necessarily blame Druid either for just being like, you know what, shut up, be quiet. Like you're not listening. People have tried to communicate with you like reasonably, and you're not receiving that. So you know what? Shut the fuck up. I get it, but with that being the case, there is only one real way that could have ended. Like it was just kind of a rest. It was like you said, it was a ticking time bomb, and when you added Druid, it probably literally you cut the red wire, and the time went from 30 minutes to 3 minutes. You know what I mean? Like it's unfortunate. But let's go ahead. Let's move on to the next story of the day. Go ahead and take it away, Sam.
All right. I got a shorter one that's more of an advice one by Impressive Owl 1398. It is rant/seeking advice. My first problem player in my first campaign. Hey everyone, I've been running my first ever campaign for about 3 months now, and I really need to vent about a problem player who is making the experience more stressful than it should be. At first, the issues were small. He'd accidentally roll an extra die on attack rolls, claim his AC was 3 points higher than it should be, and spend more key points than he actually had. As a new DM, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, thinking it was just an innocent mistake. But over time, the problems snowballed. The metagaming became rampant, especially whenever he felt he wasn't properly rewarded with loot after encounters. If another player got a shiny new piece of gear and he didn't, he'd throw a tantrum in game. He started lashing out at important NPCs, derailing important moments, walking all over dialogue, and steering the group into directions that were clearly bad for everyone. It feels like he's punishing the game whenever things don't go his way. Now it's gotten to the point where I have to check his character sheet every session and during sessions to make sure there's no shady stuff going on. It's exhausting. And I hate that I have to be the quote fun police with him just to keep the game running fairly. The worst part? This player brought 2 other friends of the campaign with him, and they've been awesome. No issues with them at all. They're engaged, respectful, and a joy to DM for. But because I've known the problem player for years, I know that if I confront him directly or enforce consequences in game, he'll drop out and probably take at least one of his friends with him. Here's the tricky bit. Outside of TTRPGs, he's fine. I don't dislike him as a person, but in this setting, he's become the worst kind of player. Hyper competitive. In a non competitive game. Always arguing over the rules, constantly pushing back against authority, and to make things even worse, he's older than the rest of us. So he's constantly little broing us, acting like the seasoned veteran who knows better. I'm sure some of you can relate. He's one of those can't live with him, can't live without him types of friends. But as much as I put up with his quirks, he's prone to big, fat baby fits when things don't go his way, and I really don't want to lose this campaign. I spent a lot of time working on it and crafting the story, and I think I've done a pretty great job with the narrative. Everyone else, when they're not annoyed with him, has been really enjoying the game and has told me that are engaged with the story. I've even caught them on Discord theorizing about where the plot will go, which makes me feel like all my hard work is paying off. All that to say, losing at least 2, if not 3 players in my 6-player party to remove one problem player would be devastating. Has anyone else been in this situation? How do you deal with a player like this when the cost of losing them is so high? Any advice on handling it without tanking the whole campaign? I'll let you go first, Adam, because I have some genuine advice. If you'd like to get in there and see what you want to say. You're muted, by the way.
Thank you. It literally popped up as soon as you said it too, and I was like, oh God, okay. Whew, this is I have always had a bit of I have a personal, I guess, pet peeve of just hypocritical or just very immature individuals. And it kind of sounds like the case where this guy is just like, he's all up his own ass crack, to be honest with you. Like, he's just kind of like, this is, if you cannot trust a player with their own character sheet for stuff, like if it has gotten that bad and to that point, like, I'm sorry, and I get it, but like, and we've said this before, literally, I think we said this just earlier, or maybe did we find a time to say this almost every video at this point, where there are some people that even if you might be close or friends or whatever outside the game, that you can't play with them in the game. It's weird. I still don't understand it. I still don't know why sometimes people can just switch, almost like it's unlocking a hidden secret, like alternate personality or whatever of themselves that they feel like they can finally come out and express in the game. But sometimes you just cannot coexist with that person in the game, and they need to be excised, like an infested, rotted, appendage or piece of flesh. Like, just, it needs to be, you need to let it go. I'm sorry. Like, it's a bit of an extreme example, but it's it seems like this shit is only escalating. So I don't really see at this point what else you can really do that will actually, if you say that you really care about this campaign and you do not want it to crumble, you gotta let him go. And because, again, like, he's literally showcasing almost every aspect or mannerism that is indicative of, like, really bad. Like, literally, you say he's become the worst kind of player. He's hyper competitive in a non-competitive game. He's always arguing over the rules. He's constantly pushing back against authority. All of this stuff. He's apparently constantly whining about not getting loot. You can't trust him with his character sheet. Like, there is no other. I personally believe there is no other real path to take. There is no alternative. I think you've done your best, but if you really care about the longevity and the foundation of your game, he has to go. There is no other real way to do it. And I get it. It would be devastating, but look, even if you lose 3 players, you can still play a great D&D game with 3 players. I've been in many of them. Most games, in fact, I've played in that have lasted longer and have actually, like, done well, has been with hell. I did it with 2 players and 1 GM one time. That was great. Again, to be fair, the GM, like you might have to maybe give them a DM NPC to help maybe support them if necessary. But you can still do it. You can. At this point, I'm gonna tell you, it's gonna be astronomically way better than what you're currently dealing with now with the 1 toxic player, even if the other 2 players do leave. Maybe they won't, though. You don't know for certain. And that's not a reason not to do the right thing and the thing that you need to do. Just because you don't know, there might be, more loss along with it or more collateral damage. There really is only, I think, the one right way to go with this at this point. So you gotta, as the GM, you have taken upon yourself the responsibility to make sure to do your best. I want to make that clear. To do your best only. You're not gonna always be able to do it, but to do your best to make sure that the game continues on in the best possible quality, form, and way it possibly can. And there's only really one way, in my opinion, that you can do that at this point. So that's about my 2 cents on it. What about you, Sammy? What you got?
So here's what I'll say. The thing that I learned through my DM, or like both my DMing stuff and a lot of the playing, is I played with 10 players, 8 players, 6 players, 4 players, 3 players.
Yep.
Hell, I had a session with 2.
Yep.
3 to 4 player mark, but most of my campaigns now are 4 to 6. Just consistently speaking.
Yep.
I have to say 3 to 4 players is peak D&D.
It can be.
It's kind of the perfect amount.
It really can be. I will say 5,
anything more than that, things get bogged down. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. It gets.
It can be. It can be.
To me, like if you have strong role players and people that are invested, 4 players is
exactly. I think 4 players is the perfect amount.
Everyone can cover a base. Everyone can have an opinion. You don't have people getting drowned out in the corner, as long as all 4 players are present. If you have 4 players and one of them is just kind of chilling, I think you're losing the plot. And if you have a player that just kind of sits in the back and just likes being there for combat, having 5 players would be fine. But 4 active players, 4 active invested players are probably the best thing you could ask for as a DM. So in what I see here reading this story, kick him. Don't kick him like a dickhead. Like just be like, talk to him, be like, hey,
be respectful.
Like, sorry, like we're friends, but also I don't like how you play this game. I'm assuming you've talked to them before, and it hasn't changed anything. If you haven't done that, do that first. Do that first, because
address the problem.
You know what? There's the major possibility that because you've had a friendship with this person, that maybe just there's a chance that just being straight up with them might make them change their ways to a degree. And even if they still keep some of that, it'll be more in a way that you can handle and it's not terrible. But if you've already talked to them, legitimately sit them down, be like, hey, like I've already talked to you about this. You haven't changed your ways. We're not going to have you at the table anymore. We're still friends. I still care about you, but like this isn't working for me. It's my game. I run it. I spend time on it, and you don't care or take it seriously.
Respecting it. You're not respecting it.
And you let it fall where it falls. You tell the other players, like, hey, this is what I did. I can't force any of you to be here, but if you enjoy the game and appreciate it, I'd like for you to stay, and you hope for the best. It sounds like you'll still have 3 players, possibly 5. And you know what? If you got to do a little bit of extra work to tone down some of your counters or change them because now you're running with one less player, so be it. If you have to change things because you're running with 3 players or 4 players, that's okay. And I'm going to say this right now. Those 2 friends might leave right now. But there is nothing to say that they won't come back at a later date. And it sounds like they're both invested. And it sounds like even if they leave with this guy, as soon as things cool down, which shouldn't take that long, 1 or 2 of them might come back anyway. Because you've got them invested and you've done your job as a GM, DM, whatever, to engage them. They've been engaged. You said it yourself. So I wouldn't be too worried about it. I really wouldn't. Because at the same time, it sounds like you already have 3 people who want to be there anyway, with no ties to this individual. And as a DM who's DM'd for larger groups and also very small groups, there is something very rewarding about DMing for a small group. Everyone's decision matters. Everyone is present because they have to be.
Yeah.
They have to be.
It's
so
just,
do it.
it's way more efficient.
DM for half the party. Change your encounters. Fucking do it. It's rewarding as hell. Just do it. Don't be afraid.
Just do it.
At the very
don't let your dreams be dreams.
The worst thing that can happen is you still have players dedicated to your game. In most of the stories we read, in most of our own experiences, it's not, oh, I'll have some players left. It's everyone's gone or it's going to dissolve. It doesn't sound like that's going to be the problem. So, no offense, you don't have a worst case scenario here. This isn't Armageddon. This is what needs to happen, and that's okay. Let it happen. But be the bigger person. Be civil. Be tactful. That way, no matter what happens, no one's gonna look at you like, "Wow, what a dick." No, don't be a dick. And it sounds like you already know that, so you're there already.
Just get out of your own way. Just don't let the fear rule you or control you. Okay, whatever you're imagining is most likely astronomically worse than what will actually happen, even with the worst case scenario.
Yeah, 100%.
So just, and I love that Sam said it too. Ironically, literally what you said is almost word for word what the top voted comment says too, which is kick him.
I didn't read them.
Yeah, kick him. For a multitude of reasons, kick him. As someone who has had to do this with problem players, it's worth it regardless of the fallout. Offer the olive branch of still staying friends and continuing to do whatever you do outside of the game, but expect him to throw a big baby tantrum and go scorched earth. Hope he doesn't, but I assume he will. And in worst case, you took the high road and tried to be the bigger person. And then OP responds and says, I'll probably try and have a more robust conversation about it with him before the next session. The scorched earth thing does terrify me, though. I mean, him throwing a baby fit and going silent on me for a week or two, I can handle because we've had this back and forth many times over the years. But that, in addition to possibly nuking the campaign temporarily as far as narratives for the characters, as well as balance for all the encounters planned ahead, would be pretty terrible to deal with. And it's like, again, OP, I will say, if your friend is literally doing this shit where they apparently have baby tantrums and they just go dark on you for weeks at a time, I'm going to go ahead and say that it doesn't sound like the most healthy or great friendship and relationship to be with. Again, I don't know your dynamic. I don't know what you guys have gone through together, but that doesn't sound the best to me. And if this is something that seems to, like, happen multiple times overall, I think it's even more of a reason just to be like, okay, you know what? Eventually, you gotta just let it take its course. You gotta let shit take its due course. But yeah, with that, I think that's all we got for this one here. Unless you have anything else to say about this one, buddy.
No, I think we both had our opinions on it. I think it went well.
Okay, perfect.
I picked it because it's very advice heavy.
Honestly, yeah, I think it was a great one to choose. Really quick, y'all, we're going to take a quick break real quick just to go to the bathroom and handle some things. We'll be back in just a second. Although for you, it'll literally just be a couple seconds. But we'll be back in a moment for you.
You paused yours, right?
And we're back. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Sorry about that. Just had to take a little quick potty break since we've actually been here a bit longer than normal. But that's all right. We're glad that you didn't miss us too much, we hope. Let's go ahead. Let's kick it off with the next story of the day. Got a couple more here for you. Aren't rid of us just yet. Let's see here. This one is titled The Codependent Edge Runner by N. Jolly. Hey all, been about a year since I've posted my last RPG horror story. Hopefully that's because you haven't had any. If that's the case, love the streak. But delving back into the world of cyberpunk with someone who's recently been removed from our game. The players in this tale are as follows. We got a cyberpunk, yes sir. There's me. There's our solo. There's our netrunner. There's our game runner, who's also kind of new to the system/world and still getting his legs underneath him. And of course, there is the star of the show themselves, our nomad. Part 0, Weird Coincidence. We'd all joined the game from an open posting over on the Tal Discord. and I had at first noticed something familiar about R. Turns out I did actually know him from somewhere. He had applied to a game that I was running at some point. I looked through I looked through his application again and the conversation we had, and a lot of what he was saying was red flags to me as a GM. They might have been fine for others, but I know the kind of game that I want to run. Talking about stuff like how he wanted to not be so constrained by loot and how he wanted a real drama in a way that just felt, I don't know, confrontational. So seeing him here in this game was a little strange to say the least, but whatever. Part 1: The in-game issues. Early into our game, Nomad quickly gained a reputation as a coward. Anytime we'd suggest a fun or neat idea, he'd just be talking it down constantly, telling us how much more we needed to plan it, if not just saying outright it was dumb because he had a better idea and it was far less fun. Which then inevitably led him to not being happy when the characters were rightfully treating him as a coward. It had evolved through the game in strange ways how he took this, and always felt like if he let us, he was not the leader of the crew, by the way, do something crazy, it was done so we'd stop calling him such a stick in the mud all the time. There was one thing we always did love about Nomad, though, and that was that he was absolutely unable to speak to female NPCs. Oh my God, it was the most awkward situation imaginable. The guy would stumble through words like he'd just gotten a new tongue that day, making romantic overtures with all the grace of, well, quite frankly, a one-legged dog learning how to breakdance. It had gotten to the point where we talked with the GM about giving him more of these chances, just to see how bad it could actually get. Honestly, it was genuinely a treat, and it never got any better, lucky for us. Continuing on, though, Nomad also had issues with metagaming hard, and I mean hard. Slight spoilers for Black Chrome, but I had talked about visiting Three Pieces shop often, to which once it was brought up by Nomad, who butts in randomly with, "Hey, but did you know he runs a secret night market that's only open to customers?" We're not even 4 sessions in. My character is basically a complete newbie to the edge runner scene, and my character just gives a nervous, no, I didn't. That's cool. Because he's just straight up lore dumping on us. He'd also just decided he could get an invite to Woodchipper's night market because he was a nomad without checking with the GM about it at all. The GM, unfortunately, didn't know a lot about the world and such at this time, so he probably just assumed that this was a thing that nomads could do. So, building up his own importance and just lore dumping on us was a constant thing with Nomad, as he always tended to know plot-critical NPCs. It made the whole world feel just so much smaller when he's talking about how he has a contact with Nomad Santiago and others like that. Like he was flexing on us that he knew the lore. So because of this, he often tried to push his stories to the forefront, which has left poor Netrunner basically hung out to dry story-wise. Netrunner is a goddamn trooper, though. Gotta give him credit. I also had a sneaking suspicion he invested in tech to try and steal my thunder. But that's just an assumption on my part, to be fair. He did, however, assume that I was trying to steal his thunder at one point because he wanted to steal an AV4, and I wanted to get a flying motorcycle because I thought it'd be cool. But I at no point had any desire to steal his thunder. I just wanted a flying bike, and he had to publicly convince himself, he did this a lot, that things were okay. There was also the issue of our group's dynamic. I had a business that he was starting in-game. Again, bear with me, acolytes. Sorry, yeah, some of this is the way he's structuring. It's a little bit difficult, so I'm trying to paraphrase a bit with this one as well. I had a business that we started in game with a bit of a goofy gimmick that we'd hand out business cards to anyone and recruit people during firefights. You know, the general carny/used car salesman shenanigans. And Nomad was all in on this shit. The level of sucking up he did about this and trying to flag bear for the company was honestly uncomfortable at times. He'd always frame it as things he did for us, the group, but it never really felt like it. It just felt like he was doing this to say, see, now you see I'm a team player. Yeah, you should all like me now, right? Honestly, it all just kind of came off as very disingenuous. Now, at one point, our GM wasn't able to run, so I stepped in to run red chrome cargo for the crew, during which the crew was offered X money and one favor from the Hornet for this job. The crew did the job, although they got beat to shit while in the process of it, and came back to Hornet. Nomad had asked for Hornet to source the Master Mechanics Toolkit, which, just for a heads up, is a 20,000 eddy item. For those who don't play, this is both a hilarious amount of money, but in Cyberpunk, typically the players are gated on what gear they can buy, needing sources to buy things for them. And this was in the super luxury tier, the highest it goes. Hornet agreed to source it for them, which is an honestly large amount of work for him even. And Nomad got legit mad that he and the crew weren't just straight up given a 20,000 eddy item on top of their normal payment and tried to say that I tricked them. Honestly, it just spoiled the end of the session and deflated everyone, especially me, for how whiny they were about what was an absolutely outrageous request. Part 2, out of game issues. None of this is really the crux of why we got rid of him. Sure, it's weird and annoying and bad, but this was normal-ish TTRPG behavior that we just all sort of dealt with. Like needing an imperfection in what was a great game in order to appreciate it more. No, the issues began when Nomad started emotionally manipulating... Oh, I think you meant to say now. Now, the issues began when Nomad started emotionally manipulating the group, asking if we actually liked him, wondering why we all seemed closer with each other than we were with him. To be fair, that was very much the circumstance. Me and Solo had become a sort of Bash Brother combo in the game, and I'd invited GM to come play in another Cyberpunk game that I was running. But none of us felt like we really owed him friendship when he acted the way that he did. He'd also often talk about how this was one of the nicest games he'd ever played in, and how normally there were large problems in his other games with interpersonal issues and infighting. Well, we never really had the heart to tell him how much of that was probably based on how he himself acted. But he was picking up that we were all jiving with each other, and it went from just feeling left out to feeling like we actively hated him, I guess. So let's just clear something up right now. I didn't hate him. I didn't like him, but hate is a bridge too far. He had one night where he just left this straight up proclamation about how he was feeling towards the group that no one interacted with until he just up and deleted it before people were active again. But we all did know how he felt and that he was trying to garner sympathy. More recently in the game, he'd almost swung the cowardice pendulum back around and was starting to pick fights, that was my bad, with basically every enemy we had and punching way above our weight class. My guy wanted a street adjacent level group to beef with Arasaka. Now, I don't know if you guys might be aware of this, but if you've played the Cyberpunk 2077 game, or even just know anything about Cyberpunk, Arasaka is one of the biggest, most powerful mega corporations in the game. They have some of the most advanced technology, chrome gear, upgrades or whatever, so that gives you some context to how crazy that shit is. He was also doubling down on the everything I do is for the crew mentality. The last straw was another moment of, I think you all hate me, that GM, Solo, and I all had to just tamp down on. We were honest with Nomad. We told him that we felt uncomfortable with this and that it wasn't fair of him to offload his emotional needs onto a group that were just there to play a game. There wasn't an introspective moment here, unfortunately. He just started carrying on like nothing happened. At which point, Solo and I both had to talk to the GM about kicking him out. We'd already done so before, but we were told, let's just wait and see when it came to things, especially since removing someone from a group is a big decision with how long we'd been playing at that point, which had been about over 3 months. The GM agreed that Nomad was a burden to have around and promptly removed them from the game. As far as I've heard, he hasn't talked to anyone from the group, but as is policy on my end, I block people like that, so I admittedly have no clue. The fallout was surprisingly small, all things considered, with Netrunner popping in after it was all over with, without seeming angry or upset about it at all. And Solo, the GM, and me were all happy to just have it all over with. As a fun side note to this, the last game in which Nomad was involved had the crew stealing new cars, thus, ironically, making his role redundant. Part 3, conclusion. I guess if I have anything to say to wrap this up, it's that if you think a group of people hate you, it's probably best to avoid playing in a group like that. This was a cyberpunk game, but the old adage of no D&D is better than bad D&D still stands. End post. So what do you think of this one, bud?
I don't have the what's it called? The wherewithal for like the cyberpunk stuff. I watched part of this show. I don't think I couldn't bring myself to finish it.
Really?
It was too sad. I was like, I knew what happened and I didn't want to see it. It was gonna make me cry.
That's yeah, it's fair. It is a very sad it's a very sad ending. It's beautiful, but very in a very sad, way.
Yeah, like, you know what sucks more than anything is this guy sucks. This guy as a just as a player is not someone who I'd want to play with, not someone who I'd want to interact with.
Probably not.
It's someone that is trying to be a team player for all the wrong reasons, wants to be the center of attention for the wrong reasons. It just doesn't, and like I'm sure you've probably played with plenty of people like that.
I mean,
it's just like you can't really win. There's no winning there.
Yeah, I understand maybe what he's coming from. Again, I think this is another situation that again, we don't have as much context as we did before, but it might be similar to the Brandon story too, where this guy not really having a great go in real life, a lot of shit out of his control. Maybe he's kind of isolated and, solitary, and not necessarily by choice, mind you, but by, maybe he just doesn't really connect with people very well or very easily. And so with this, he's like, hey, there's an opportunity for me to make friends and stuff and connect with them about things because we both like these things already. And the problem being is he might just be maybe on the spectrum or something. And again, socially inept and awkward and not able to navigate well. But again, as always, we always have to look, okay, how much of somebody's personal, maybe mental stability or state or whatever is enough of a justification or an excuse for their chosen behavior and manner. That's always kind of the big question that I try to find and ask, even though it's difficult a lot of the time. I would say with this though is that it is a thing where it's just like I definitely play with people, for instance, and I think I've said this multiple times before, where just like I don't understand what is your intention in this character, right? I will also say I think you and I both have a bit of a thing about cowardice in characters, where you're like, if you're going to be a coward or punk, there's a difference between being like careful and not an idiot or stupid and being strategic. And there's another thing where you're just kind of being a wuss and you're being a punk and you're just, you're kind of being bitch made right now, where you're just like, come on, bro. Like, and if you're going to do those things, you're probably not going to be like, again, you have to ask the question, why is your character even involved in this particular, profession? Whether you're an adventurer in D&D or an edge runner in Cyberpunk. Like this is an intrinsically dangerous, highly risky thing to do. And if your character is doing this, it should already, if you're making a character, it should already kind of be understood that you're making a character who understands this risk, has experienced this risk to a certain extent because they have backgrounds, and is doing this and is willing to take on said risk to a certain extent. Again, within reason, of course. Yeah. Now, I get that he's trying to say like, oh, well, you need to plan it out more. But another thing too being is like, well, if the party wants to do this, it's going to usually be majority vote for a lot of things. Most of the time, if people abstain, then you're like, kind of again, that annoys me too in another aspect. But for the most part, you want to try and get the full consensus or at least the input of every party member before you make a decision about something.
Yeah.
And depending on, again, what might be the majority kind of vote or thing, if people have it, that's usually what you want to go with. Otherwise, obviously, you should have a conversation about what makes the most sense. In regards to this, it's like, okay, if this guy's saying, we didn't do it enough or whatever, we didn't think about it enough, then it's like, okay, well, then you have to propose either an alternative or your reasoning behind why we shouldn't do what we want to do here. And obviously then make the decision from there. What OP says, though, is anytime he protested the plan, he apparently put forth another plan that he was like was better, but apparently was also less fun. So I mean, I don't know. This also could be a product of just a differing opinion of how they wanted to approach a certain thing and what was considered fun or better. Hard to say for certain, of course. We only have OP's rendition.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But I will say that I think I feel like for this one, I feel like he was being less of a intentional douchebag or an asshole, and I think he again similarly maybe to Brandon is that he was trying way too hard to make friends, be liked, be likable, be the main character, be da 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 whatever. Like he was just really socially inept and probably a bit selfish, but also maybe a bit just inexperienced and unaware.
Yeah.
And so it kind of
that's most of the time.
That's what I'm saying. And it's unfortunate because it's like he seemed to know a lot about the game, right? And I think we've had the same we talked about this before, where it's like you and I, we both love reading up lore and knowing these stuff and having this information. And it can be very fun and fulfilling and satisfying to utilize the lore and the knowledge that we have read out of game, in a game. It's fun. And I get that, I see that very much here where he was like, he was excited to share his vast knowledge of the game and the lore with everybody to maybe make him seem really cool and really knowledgeable. But unfortunately, it came across, I guess, more as kind of just being as metagaming or overbearing or trying too hard or, and
all of the above.
Yeah. And it is unfortunate. I do not get the sense he was trying again. I don't get the sense he was trying to be a douchebag. I think he really was just, I get a more essence of he's kind of just a lonely guy that was trying way too hard and wanting way too bad to finally have a connection, but he doesn't really have the capacity to connect because he's trying it on such a surface level. And he's also kind of he's being selfish. So it's hard to connect with a person if you're not really willing to see that other person too, right? And consider that other person. If you're only really looking at yourself or considering just yourself, it becomes difficult for a person to really reciprocate wanting to connect with you, because why would they? And it's kind of the same thing here. He literally lays that out where it's like, oh, everybody else was kind of vibing and connecting, but nobody else was vibing and connecting with me. And it's like, well, because you weren't really trying to. You were trying to be kind of the main character. You were trying to make yourself
push your whole agenda above everyone else.
Yeah, you were trying to make yourself seem better instead of connecting and trying to relate to them as peers or equals. A lot of the time, he kind of presented himself as being superior and being better, and so that's why people should acknowledge him and connect with him and be friends with him. But again, another one that I felt was it's just kind of another really sad one where I feel like the problem dude in general, he's just kind of a sad individual. I think he's just kind of a sad, lonely dude who's looking for some real connection, but just doesn't really seem. But he's got a lot of growing up to do, and I think he should maybe start with kind of figuring out his own shit first. And that's always the thing, right? You gotta look a lot more internally and fix a lot of shit yourself first before you can really start expecting and you never should expect, but even wanting and trying to establish more external connections and relationships. You got to have a good internal relationship with yourself first, and I don't think he does. And I don't think Brandon does, and I think that's why a lot of the shit that is happening now is kind of going on for them.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, anything else you have to say about this one, bud?
No, I
Yep.
think we've been through a good bit.
All right. I think the last thing then we'll say about this is there is a comment down below that says, I don't know, man. Feels like this bloke just couldn't win. He was too inactive and didn't get involved, so he tries to get involved, perhaps overcorrecting, and you assume it's disingenuous. Like, and that's kind of what I'm yeah. Like he offers you an olive branch, calling you all top lads, and you all assume it's just because he was the problem at all of his other tables. I don't buy that, by the way. If he cottoned on to the cohesion you all had and it was different from his other groups, strikes me that his groups had wider dissension. I'd feel bummed out and excluded too if people were flagrantly excluding me. Perhaps he was overbearing, but just telling him to shut up wasn't exactly going to ease his paranoia. I can only go by what you've written. I wasn't there, but based on this post, I think there was a lot of introspection to go around. If at any time this guy felt like his efforts had been appreciated, or if someone just tried to meet him halfway, he might not have been so down on himself. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about it too, where it's like, again, yeah, it definitely seems like he's overbearing, but I don't really think OP or the others did much. And it is absolutely a thing. And I will also say I've felt it too, where I feel maybe kind of iced out of a situation or whatever, where I'm like, I'm kind of just there and like everybody else seems to kind of just be connecting maybe with a couple other people or each other. And I'm kind of just the odd one out. Like that happened a lot when I was younger. And it doesn't feel great. It's not a great feeling to kind of just feel like the odd one out constantly and to be excluded kind of constantly, you know, especially when you see everybody else seems to be really connecting. Again, I will say, obviously, with this guy, like if we take what OP is saying, a lot of his behavior just straight up, I guess, right away seemed confrontational, dramatic, or problematic. And so I don't know, like, and that's, you know, it's hard to say. It's like, okay, like, again, like his whole thing about him being like, hey, we're trying to do these plans and these fun ideas and stuff, and he's be talking it down, telling us we didn't plan it out enough. It's like, that kind of come across to me as like, okay, are you like, but then apparently though, he later on was trying to go in the opposite or overcorrect by trying to pick a fight with Arasaka. So I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say whether or not OP might be being reasonable with it, because I've played with players who are like, yeah, this would be super fun. Let's do this crazy kind of thing where we're gonna like, you know, try to again, I don't necessarily want to give too specifics, but I've played with players who will say like they want to do some crazy ass shit where I'm like, we should maybe think about that a little bit more before we just go diving into this situation here, half cocked.
What do you mean?
And so it's like, you know, for me, unless there was a little bit more, I don't. I guess if I had the slight suspicion that OP didn't offer more specifics on that. He literally just gives a very ambiguous, like, yeah, you know, anytime we would suggest a fun or neat idea, he'd just start talking it down. And it's like, okay, well, what were some of these fun and neat ideas that he would contest? Because you give a specific inclination when he goes off the rails and he starts trying to pick a fight with Arasaka. That's a specific situation scenario that is ridiculous. But what were some of the ones that you guys said that he apparently was, you know, arguing against that was like less fun of an idea? What does that mean? Like, so I don't know. Yeah, again, I would also agree with kind of the comment down there, at least a little bit, that it's just like he might have been, again, kind of annoying and aggravating. But at the same token, I don't really think you guys gave him any real opportunity to improve. Like, although you apparently said that you like talked about it, right, Tim? You said you were honest with Nomad, told him that you guys felt uncomfortable when he was like asking you all if you hate him, right? You're like, well, we're uncomfortable with you asking that. And it wasn't fair of you to offload your emotional needs onto the group and that are just there to play a game. It's like, okay, but I mean, at the same token, it's like, if you're not like if you're not going to talk about it, right? If he is feeling this from the group and he's trying to like confirm with you guys, like, do you guys dislike me? Do you guys hate me? Do you like what's he's trying to, I think, get some what's the word I'm looking for? What is the word, Sammy, when you're like when something is closure. He's trying to, I think, get some closure in that it's like it's pretty obvious what's happening, right? You guys are all connecting. He's not with any of you apparently. And he's calling attention to it. I personally don't think there's a problem with that. Again, I'm like, yo, if you guys do feel that way about him, did you ever actually have a conversation with him? Like about how he's acting, about what's going on, about like his behavior in game, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you did or not. If you did and he's still acting this way, because you guys then say like you all you say, I think you said, is that you told him you felt uncomfortable with him asking if you guys hate him. And you guys never really, I think, responded to that before then. And don't even technically answer that question. You just tell him that you feel uncomfortable when he asks you that question. And he's like, do you hate me? And again, to be fair, I think I do not disbelieve OP, like in saying like it seems pretty clear, yeah, he's maybe trying to fish for sympathy a bit, maybe. Like he might be trying to like, but at the same token, because hate, I think, is a strong word. But at the same token, he's also not entirely unfounded for him, because you guys are kind of icing him out. Like, so maybe you don't hate him, but you obviously don't like him. Like, you're not, I don't really think, you're not necessarily really playing with him. And it doesn't really seem like you tried too much. Like, it's because you say literally right off the bat, you already had kind of some bias or prejudice towards him, GM, where you literally said you probably wouldn't have let him into any of your games based off of what he said. Even though, they might have been fine for others, but the type of game apparently that you wanted to run, like,
Yeah, which leads me to think like, okay, then why'd you let him in? If you
well,
don't like his play style, if you don't really get along with it,
well,
just
OP wasn't the GM for this situation where he was a player, to be fair,
fair.
but it is still just like, I don't know. I just get the vibe kind of from OP too, that they I get it. People don't like uncomfortable things. They don't like dealing with it. A lot of people have a very automatic avoidance response, right? Instead of maybe addressing it and maybe trying to work through it or figure it out.
Being an adult.
Most people are not. And most people, or at least they don't act like it. And they usually will choose just avoidance until they can't avoid it anymore. And then, they still, even then, will still try to avoid it constantly if they can. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
and I get a little bit of that vibe here. I don't really think anybody here was. I think everybody here made mistakes, and there are definitely some issues or aspects with everybody here that could use some work. Yeah. Well, anything else you got to say about this one, bud?
No, I'm good with it.
All right, let's go ahead. Let's move on to the next one then for the day. This one is up for you, buddy. Hit it.
I have from Ultimate Chaos 233, problem player trolls, problem co-DM gets kicked from the game. This is a lighthearted tag. Full disclosure, this happened years ago. Don't worry about me leaving things out to make myself look better. I don't look great no matter how you slice this. I share this to offer entertainment value only. Years ago, I got my chance to join my first TTRPG as a player. One of my friends, I'm assuming these are fake names, hopefully. One of my friends, Kayla, started dating Jace, who offered to run a game/campaign for us. The game was Pathfinder First Edition. While I could ramble on for hours about the system, the relevant part is that you can make basically any character concept be strong/viable with enough systems knowledge. And a lot of stuff you can do is straight out of an anime. So it's great for otakus, which I kind of was. I still am, but I also was. After being invited to join the game, I dove into character creation, spent weeks on a character, not unheard of for Pathfinder First Edition character building / optimization. I even offered to make characters for my friends. My best friend Sarah and her husband John. We were all pretty tight. I figured we'd have a bad experience if we didn't have strong / good characters, an incorrect assumption in general for TTRPGs. I was playing a female dervish bard. My bestie was playing a male rogue, and her husband was playing something not relevant to the story. Awesome. So why include that? So game day rolls around, and we find out that our friend and her boyfriend are going to be co-DMs, as well as run DMPCs. We all meet in a tavern, and they spend a long time describing each other's DMPCs. An uncomfortably long time. How Kayla was a beautiful divine angel descended from heaven, and how Jace was a big, strong, masculine barbarian with rippling muscles, etc., etc. I can't recall if they bothered choosing character names that weren't their own, and how all eyes in the tavern were on them due to how masculine the barbarian was and how feminine the angel was. They defied everyone's ideas of beauty / masculinity, etc. Before I go on, I cannot stress enough how me and my friends were new to TTRPGs and how juvenile and ridiculous we were. Cue me and my bestie coming up with a plan. Hey, if all eyes are on them, the tavern goers should be easy to pickpocket from, right? After some excellent rolls, we proceed to rob most of the tavern blind. Then we proceed to go upstairs and have sex with each other, each deciding to steal from the other person after the sex was completed. It was at this point the DMPCs came to lecture us, Jace's barbarian lecturing my female character, Kayla's angel lecturing Sierra's male rogue, on how we're not behaving like proper adventurers and how I need to follow the manly code and how Sierra needed to be a proper lady. For those following at home, that's 0 for 2 regarding the gender of our characters. I was fed up at this point, and based off what happens next, so was Sierra and John. I cast suggestion on the barbarian, he failed, and I told him to make out with the nearest male. He goes silent, his face starts to turn red. Sierra was dying and was literally rolling around on the floor laughing. John starts laughing uncontrollably as well, and the co-DM just says nothing. After we're all done laughing to his credit, he does narrate how he goes over and kisses the guy. I immediately try to run away, he catches up easily somehow, and again lectures me on proper adventurer behavior. The session then proceeds as Jace pulls John aside and says that he's exploring a separate dungeon. Then Kayla runs a dungeon for me and Sierra. The NPC was absent. And we have what would normally be some very bland combats, but we spiced it up with our roleplay and just kind of feeding off each other, to be honest. But Kayla didn't seem to mind. Afterwards, the DM tells Sierra and John that I'm not welcome at follow up games and not to tell me this. They told me anyway. But I was an obvious min-maxer who was only going to break the game with how overpowered my characters were. And they said he really emphasized that the only reason I was not that was the only reason I was not being invited back. No idea how strong my character was. I do have a knack for optimization, but he never saw my character in combat, just Kayla, and my character only really tried hard in combat when Sierra's rogue was trying to solo monsters and show off for my bard, but they were having trouble doing so. Hopefully, it wasn't too long. I also hope it entertains some of you and you feel compelled to tell me I was a jackass. Go right ahead. I agree.
Oh, since you asked, OP, yeah, you a bit of a jackass here. I can't really.
I also can't necessarily blame them either.
I can't blame you either, though. I mean, the irony of it is that you were a jackass, but everybody was in this situation. Like it was kind of just equal opportunity jackass at that point. It was a jackass off. You know what I mean? Like it was, So the fun part is that this is obviously not the most egregious moment to do so. I don't think I would have done that still. I still feel like, obviously, way better way to handle this. But at the same token,
I don't know.
Yeah, kind of screw these GMs. I'm not gonna lie. Like I'm just saying, like these GMs right off the bat, like it's kind of funny. It is. It's a little bit funny. It's
yeah,
like,
I don't see this as a huge issue.
It's a little bit funny. I mean, again, I don't know, because like I said, right off the bat, it seems like both OP and his friend Sarah were already kind of going to be problematic characters, because I mean, the bless you, the co-GMs, they did a lot of just super self-obsessed, absorbed, annoying, like verbal vomit of describing how incredible and amazing their characters looked. but they hadn't actually done anything horrible or terrible at that point right away. Like, except for that. It was literally just that. And right away, both the Bard and the Rogue did literally the most iconic, problematic Bard and Rogue thing where they just like, we're going to steal everything in the bar now while everybody's enraptured by these people. And it's like, okay. Right off the bat, it seems like everybody is kind of terrible here, except for maybe the husband, John, ironically. I'll also say, too, I don't know, just it's a little strange, just maybe a little sussy. You and your best friend Sarah immediately run up the stairs to then sleep together afterwards as well, and then steal from each other. Like, again, it's kind of funny and comical, but if I was a GM and you guys did that shit, that would be huge red flags for me, like right away. Where you guys are like, it would like if you guys maybe did that to each other, it would kind of be funny. But it just shows like you are, yeah, I think you are probably gonna try and abuse the mechanic or the ability that the fact that you as the rogue and the bard have super ungodly high whatever. To be fair, this is Pathfinder first edition, so I'm not entirely sure or familiar with how that goes, but I also do know that like Pathfinder, especially first edition, has the capacity to have some redonkulous bonkers like bonuses and shit to it. So yeah, this one here I read and I thought this is just kind of really funny and hilarious, kind of all around. I don't think I can really sign off on any of this a ton. But at the same token, I am also just like, but you know what? I kind of can sort of like I would much rather prefer that none of this happens at any point. But if it was going to happen, I kind of feel like this was almost the exact perfect scenario for this to all happen uh together. Yeah, what do you think, bud? Like, oh, sorry, I can't hear you. Your mic.
My bad. It's super funny in the sense that like realistically speaking, uh I kind of understand the reason for acting the way that they did. Like, don't get me wrong.
Like I
Yes,
said, I get it
yes, I think
after.
OP is a problem player in this instance, and they fully acknowledge that. But I think the way this campaign was structured from the gun
I
was
agree.
already problematic.
I agree.
And
100%.
we've had this conversation before about like, oh, I join a game online and someone says, oh, this is how the rule goes. You get to attack double the amount for dual wield. And shit like that we've talked about before. And I'd be like, I'm gone. I'm not doing this. They chose the other route of sticking around and causing issues, which I can't green light
Like I said, I
wholeheartedly.
can't necessarily sign off, but
But also, like, I'm sorry, I don't think anything they did was very egregious. And also, Pathfinder, you need to optimize to be relevant in any way, shape, or form. 5e is one of those games where you can kind of get away with bad decisions, just because of how leveling works, how feats work, how proficiencies and abilities work. But Pathfinder, in my experience, although I've only played 2e, and I looked through 3.5 uh,
there's
as
a
well.
3.5 Pathfinder now too.
Well, 3.5 like is in
Oh, D&D.
no, like the weird, what is it called? There's different versions. There's
There
Pathfinder.
is an addition. Yes, there
Pathfinder
are
2e
additions.
is like the newest Pathfinder.
Yeah, but
There's
there
but
have been
there's but
additions and things and stuff.
there's
Yes, added.
three. There's like Pathfinder 3, 3.5, 1, 2e, which is 2e is newer than 1 or 3.5 or 3. It's a bunch of garbage. But
It's
the way
strange,
the
but
way that all of those systems work compared to 5e, from what I have read, is that either there's you have to make good decisions every level and they build off of it, or when I was looking through 3.5 with a buddy of mine to guest play, uh, and I ended up not doing it, you literally from level 1 have to know what you want to do at level 20 or whatever,
Yeah.
because you have to build each level. You have to build, I need this feat to get this feat, I need this ability to get this ability, I need to make sure I have this by this point so I can get these three things and my build works. Like, and 5e isn't like that to the same degree. You can treat it that way, and I have, but you don't have to be,
No,
you don't
to
have
be
to
decent.
work.
Yeah, you don't
Well,
have to be decent
even
and
to
to work.
be viable. But I
Mhm.
think Pathfinder and the other, the kind of alternate D&D editions are a bit more number crunchy,
Yes,
and
Pathfinder has always
it's,
been considered a bit more number
yeah,
crunchy.
which is fine, and I don't think it's a
At least
bad
considered
thing.
a fifth edition, of course. Obviously,
Yeah.
fourth
Oh
edition
well,
D&D
fourth
was
was this.
very similar in that way.
Yeah,
Like I think fourth edition took a lot of what Pathfinder was at that point and incorporated a lot of that same concept into fourth edition,
but they
which
simplified it.
no, but I mean, kind of, but also not really, because it was still like it's still the most clunky of all the
And
D and D, and
no one plays fourth
nobody,
edition.
yeah, not a lot of. I'm not gonna say nobody, not a lot of people liked fourth edition. There
Maybe,
are your diehard fourth edition fans, and I'm sure there
which is
was some
weird.
great stuff about fourth edition.
Mm.
Um,
Fourth
but
edition was good for those who like tabletop war games.
yes, that's
Fourth
fair
edition was very much
because
a
there's
it
just
was more of a tabletop war game than a D&D.
yeah,
But the reality is, part of me, it doesn't necessarily blame OP for acting this way. When you get excited, make a character, offer to help people, and then you start a game, and the beginning of that game is two co-DMs basically sucking each other off. I can't, like,
I mean, like
to
I
put it so
said,
like, I'm sorry I said so vulgarly,
I feel like it was very aptly put. To be
like
fair, despite
that's
the
like, no offense,
explicitness, like
like,
yeah.
I've only played D&D with friends. If I started a D&D game, and my friend of 6, 7, 8 years started with that, I'd be like, I'm not playing this fucking game, dude. Or I'd be like, hey, what are we doing? Like, so I can't condemn OP for understanding what they did was wrong, but also this was bullshit from the gut.
No, like I said, like this. That's why I like this particular story because there is a weird kind of like area where you're just like, again, like I said, I think for me, what it is I don't think I could condemn any of OP, or rather, I cannot sign off on any of OP and like his friend Sierra's actions at the beginning because they were acting again, like you said, they were basically verbally kind of stroking themselves.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about OP. I'm
No, no,
talking
no.
about the
I'm talking about the
co-DMs.
GM. Yeah, I'm talking about the co-GM. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's not Sierra.
The co-GMs were no. I'm saying the co-GMs were verbally stroking themselves off. So then OP and his friend
Oh,
Sierra
gotcha.
went and they're like, we're gonna
Mm.
steal from everybody in the tavern now. Like they didn't. I mean, yeah. Again, what they did was exceedingly cringy, and is like, like okay. They didn't actually do anything to the players yet, though. So I feel like even then, especially because when they did that, they stole from everybody, and then they immediately ran upstairs and then started sleeping with each other and doing all this. Just basically being kind of crazy and chaotic is essentially what was happening. And it's like, okay, that's a bit explicit. I don't necessarily know if that had anything to do specifically with the introduction. Regardless, though, when I do feel they were perfectly justified, at that point is when the co-DMs literally use their DM and PCs to go and give them stern talkings. At that point, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Go scorched earth at that point. Like, absolutely, just the command thing was hilarious to me. Like 100%, that was hilarious. I again, like I said, and the only reason I'm kind of saying this too is to the co-GM's credit, when they cast suggestion and they failed, they did still go follow through with the suggestion. They
Yeah, they
didn't
didn't like it.
they didn't like it clearly, but they didn't just use their DM, fiat or whatever, their GM powers to override what happened. They followed through with it. And so the thing that's kind of the thing, right? The issue I have is they were clearly acting incredibly like they are forcing their fantasy literally on their friends here without actually being maybe more considerate of their friends. But at the same token, they didn't force anything, technically
Yeah.
speaking. They were just being exceedingly obnoxious, or what's the word when you're just like, you cannot take this person, when a person is just being like,
Stubborn?
just not stubborn. It's like you cannot handle this person. Like, it's like they're being like overwhelmingly, obnoxious or whatever, where you're just like, oh my God, I can't think of the word right now, but they were just being just overbearing. They were being overwhelmingly just annoying and obnoxious here. Like, it's clear. Like, they are being super self-absorbed and even narcissistic at that point. Like, that's borderline getting on narcissism at that point. And a holier than thou, all that stuff. That's annoying. They didn't technically, though, through any mechanics, force or screw with any of the players, though, where technically speaking, OP did. OP enforced their shit onto the whatever by using magic. Like, so I mean, that's the thing. Like, that is the one caveat. That's the one aspect that I'm like, okay, with the GMs, is like, they didn't force, they didn't use like some bullshit made up crap,
No.
spell or mechanic or anything to force anything on the players. They let shit happen as it happened, and then they responded. Yeah, super cringe, super just nah. But the way that OP and their friends reacted and responded, it was like, okay, I can't necessarily sign off on it. I get it, don't get me wrong. Yeah, super cringe, kind of funny, but also like, they didn't actually do anything. You know what I mean? They didn't actually do anything to you guys.
Yeah.
They were maybe just being a little bit too full of themselves, a bit too arrogant. And that is a problem, but they didn't actually do anything, and they remained true and or fair with the mechanics of the game. And so that's why it's like, it's hard for me to just be like, yeah, go off, scorched earth, because it could have been way, way, way worse, actually. They could have just really just, and even after the shit, it was also still a thing where like OP and Sierra, which again, little strange that you're kind of like getting real into this whole kind of dynamic and sexual thing with your, with another dude's wife. Although I know, I get it, you're best friends with her. Again,
Sound like
just
dude didn't have an issue.
it didn't sound like he had an issue, or at least OP's not telling us he had an issue. At least, again, who knows? Maybe
That's very fair.
like I said, I just feel from this, similar to kind of some of the others we've read. Obviously, this is a Reddit post. It's from one person's perspective, so it's hard to say for certain whether or not, the true full validity. Of course, I gotta take it with a grain of salt, but. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I do appreciate though that OP they owned up to it literally right at the top, and then right at the end where they're like, you know what? If you wanna go ahead and if you guys feel compelled to lambast me and to really let me have it, feel free, because yeah, I agree. So I give you mad props and respect for that, OP, if nothing else, for certain. Anything else for this one, bud?
No, I'm all good.
All right, let's move on to the last one of the day. This one is titled "Drunk Cop Threatens to Arrest GM." This happened specifically by Cyberpunk Crusader 01. This happened at a game shop in the city. Generally, I play D&D with a fairly nice community, and the GM has been running games for our group, plus other players in the game shop who come in and out of the games, for years now. One of these transient players, as I will refer to him, happened to be a cop. He had been coming to the game shop for a few months at this point and was chill with the GM. So he ended up joining our table and rolling up a drow wizard. Now, this guy, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, he had a drinking problem, okay? And would often show up buzzed, or potentially would even just straight up bring beer or whiskey, which was technically against the rules, but the employees never really enforced the no alcohol rule. This led to his character being a bit chaotic stupid, shall we say. Be it him getting involved in edgelord murder hobo antics, missing important information because he's not paying attention or can't pay attention, talking over other players, going on random rants that have nothing to do with the game, etc., etc. When he got too drunk, we would usually just try to ignore him as much as possible, but he did end up getting himself executed, shall we say, on this one mountain where our goal was to cross a chasm. He was particularly sloshed that day and decided to use a 3rd level fly spell to cross a big ass chasm filled with enemy archers and evil birds. We all had previously decided to cross via the cave system around because there was 0 chance he was going to make it. And the GM said to his character, said to the player, your character feels the cold, ethereal embrace of death as he considers what he is about to do. And then proceeds to say out of game as well, are you sure you want to do this? And he says, yes. Let me fly across it, god damn it. Y'all are just wussies. And so he did. DM had him roll acrobatics to see how well he could evade the attacks to avoid an encounter that would almost certainly lead to him falling to his death. He ended up encountering a gang of Aarakocra and rocks about 1/3 of the way across the chasm, and we were way too far to help him. The encounter was absolutely brutal, and he was downed, and then consequently fell from a height of 4,000 feet and died instantly. Weirdly enough, after a few seconds, it finally dawned on him that this wasn't a roll for death saves or wait for the party to heal you type of death. He was dead. He said, what the hell, man? I was gonna make it. The GM said, no, you most certainly were not. LOL. Even if you passed that agility check and avoided the encounter, there were several points in which you would have had to continue to pass. It was practically impossible. The player then said, oh, I see. You just wanted to kill me off. And for what? You got a problem with me or something? You do know I'm a cop, right? I could have you arrested, bucko. And trust me, you would not last a day in prison without getting your a-hole rearranged. At this point, we all froze. We kind of just looked at this drunk idiot who was literally threatening the GM over a D&D game. Thankfully, one of the other players was not having it and called him on his bullshit. Do it then. In fact, take us all down to the station. Drunkenly drive your beat-up car down to the police station and explain to your boss that the GM is under arrest for the high crime of having pretend birdmen roll dice to kill off your pretend dark elf. The problem player then got up and stormed out while cussing a storm out at the GM and ranting about how stupid the game was and how he was never going to play D&D ever again. Funny enough, we never did see him back at the store after that point. In post.
Oh.
What do you think about this one, bud?
It's a tough one. I'm gonna say this just as a me thing. I don't trust police in most instances, but this certainly is an example of really, this is how you want to play this then.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's it's kind of funny.
It's
hey,
kind of
Bucko.
funny.
Hey,
I mean,
Bucko,
if nothing else, literally, again, just another prime example of the absolute brain rotted buffoonery of an individual who seems to believe that they can do whatever the hell they want with 0 consequences and then gets angry about it after the fact. Like, I think this also brings another thing too. We talked about this before. Coming to your D&D or tabletop games under the influence of things, where it's like again, we talked about it before. If it's like a beer and pretzels game where it's just like a drop-in thing where you're just doing something light or whatever, feel free. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. You're just trying, you're just having a good time, you're just vibing, you're not really, it's not too serious, you're not really playing too much. But if you have an individual, a GM who has put in time, effort, money, resource, whatever, to make this thing for you guys, and it's supposed to be a relatively consistent, long term commitment, why the hell are you coming to this thing sloshed off your ass or under the influence? Like,
Yeah.
then shit like this happens. Then you're not necessarily thinking clearly. You're not understanding shit, especially if it's a continuous like habit or habitual thing where you're like, oh yeah, he's becoming an edgelord murder hobo. Constantly missing important information because he's not paying attention or can't pay attention because he's too, sloshed off his ass. Like, just
Yeah.
yeah, this guy. It's pretty funny though. Like he just it never hurts to have a scenario where you just have a guy completely and utterly screw himself over, despite everybody doing like everything they can to persuade him to do otherwise, to dissuade him from this course of action, to be like, yo, this makes no sense. You are guaranteed to die, and you're still gonna do this. Yeah, I can make it. Like, I feel like this is again completely similar to the whole barbarian and the two towers issue, where you're just like, do you really have a clear picture and understanding of what you're dealing with here? Do you? Are you sure? Because it doesn't seem like you do at all. Okay. Well, a lot of the time you can only expect people to learn from their mistakes once you gotta let them make it, right? You gotta let them make their mistakes to learn it. And a lot of the time, though, unfortunately, people don't seem to learn from the mistakes they make, and they just keep making the same ones over and over and over again. And you kind of hope eventually they'd learn, but the unfortunate truth is, some often you really can't. Often they really don't. They really don't seem to learn. Mm. Anything else you got on this one, bud?
No, I think it's a pretty straightforward issue here of you know,
Says something about our personal, security forces, doesn't it? With our law enforcement, doesn't it? Also, he's literally threatening to abuse his power to get back at a guy at a D&D game for a stupid thing he decided to do. Says something, hey, I hope everybody feels safe and secure.
yeah, it's
Um,
kind of ridiculous. Um, but again, there's hopefully there's an option to learn there.
you would hope so. I supremely doubt it, of course, because obviously nothing has actually happened really um, to him. But you always hope. We can always hope and dream, can't we, Sammy? Then
Yeah.
let's say with that, I think that's about all that we have for you guys for the day. Thanks for sticking us with us this far. If you have, we really appreciate it. We hope you guys enjoyed. Again, leave a comment down below what you guys think of these stories that we read. Your thoughts. Did they make you cry? Did they make you rage? Did they make you laugh? Either way, just let us know. We appreciate the discourse. Subscribe and share the channel if you haven't already. As always, we appreciate the support and the help. And with that, I do believe that we will catch you next time when we dive back down into the archive. Bye, y'all.